A New Home, Old Version, by AbyssEater. He did it again. He sacrificed himself in order to save his comrades, except this time it was his own choice. Now Naruto finds himself in a new world with all kinds of crazy stuff happening and somehow ending up with a family of his own. Despite that though, when his past catches up to him, it was only a matter of time before things would start to spiral out of control. I don't own anything, adios.
Yo, Cyroorg, Naruto called out to his friend as he approached him. Naruto. Cyroorg turned to look to where he heard his voice was coming from and noticing his friend making his way towards him. His eyes briefly glanced down as he saw he was holding Kuno in his arms, who was clothed in a small dress. Noticing his friend's stare, he explained, Yasaka-chan is very busy today, so it was better if I would bring her with me as she won't be able to keep an eye on her the entire time. Don't worry though, as I've got everything I need with me. He showed him one of his wrists where a lot of kanji could be seen scribbled together. It was used to create a sealing space that normally scrolls were used for. It was one of the more basic sealing arts that he was capable of performing, but it came in quite handy. Very well. Cyroorg turned to see his friend distracting his daughter with his fingers. As long as you'll take care of her, it shouldn't be a problem. Now, follow me as I'll show you how to get there since you aren't a devil. He began to walk as Naruto followed after him. He ignored the numerous looks sent his way, as they were probably wondering if he was Kunu's father, since he was still quite young and he was aware of that. Nonetheless, he didn't let those stares bother him one bit, as he couldn't care less what some random person he had never met thought. They walked for a bit before Cyroorg and himself entered a rather inconspicuous-looking building. Naruto raised an eyebrow as they entered an elevator, one that didn't diminish the slightest as his gaze was on Cyroorg, who seemed to be doing something with the elevator button panel before stepping back as whatever he did was done. Shortly thereafter, Naruto felt the elevator descending, though when a minute seemed to have passed and it was still continuing, he gave Cyroorg a questioning look which was met by a smirk. Seeing how they were going to have to wait it out, he closed his eyes before he hummed a soft tune. It was one Yasaka would often hum for Kuno to make her calm, though it also worked for him too. He was brought out of his trance by a light nudge to his side and he opened his eyes to see they had finally stopped. Looking down at Kuno, he saw she was asleep, or at least appeared to be, which was fine with him as the elevator opened up and they exited. Huh? Naruto blinked as he took in his new surroundings. He didn't have much time though, as Cyroorg continued on, so he'd have to get a better look at it some other time. He trailed off as they walked through an underground station. There was even a train present, and from how it looked like they were going to use it. This is how we're going to the underworld. There are several stations like these all over the world that devils can use. Usually they have one of these inconspicuous looking buildings on top that are owned by certain families. Guess that's why we were in the elevator for so long. He mused as the door on the train opened, automatically allowing them to enter. They sat down as the doors closed shortly thereafter before they shot off. An eyebrow was raised as Naruto gazed out of the window and watched things blur by from how fast, compared to other vehicles at least, they were going. Leaning back a bit to make himself more comfortable, his leg bounced a bit as he listened to the music that was playing, though he didn't pay it much attention, and Kuno seemed to like it as she moved along. Looking at Cyroorg, he saw he was on his phone doing whatever before returning to look outside. His eyes widened a bit once they finally exited what he assumed was a long tunnel, and he wasn't expecting the view he currently had. Especially not the fact that they were somehow in the air. It looked much greener than the human world, that's for sure, as he spotted the large mountain ranges in the back and the large bodies of water that were present. From where he was at, Cyroorg smirked as he saw the look on his friend's face before returning his attention back to his phone. Naruto looked away from the window as he heard Kuno make soft sounds. Looking at her, he saw her open and close her mouth repeatedly. Understanding what she wanted, he brought his wrist to his other hand, and with a small application of chakra, a feeding bottle appeared in his hand. Kuno seemed to take notice of this as she held her small arms out. He stopped her though as held the bottle and letting fired chakra circulate his hand as he remembered Yasaka telling him to warm it up to body temperature. Shaking it a bit once he was done, he brought the bottle to Kuno's mouth, who quickly got to work. He held it for her as her small hands came up to help him as she continued to drink. What is it? Naruto asked as he felt another nudge to his side. He didn't look though, as he was currently focused on Kuno, who was taking her time drinking the milk he had brought with him. We're here, came Cyroorg's reply, and Naruto then noticed that they had indeed stopped. He carefully got up as Kuno really was taking her time. Where are we now? He asked as they exited the train that led them outside, as Naruto took a deep breath. We're currently in Lilith, which is named after the wife of the original Lucifer and the capital of the underworld. He explained to the blonde, who nodded in understanding. I see. You think it's wise to let out my ears and tails, or better to not stand out? I'd say to wait until we reach our destination. You might end up being approached by those that want to add you to their peerage. Naruto nodded at his words. Alright, lead the way then. Oh, finally done now, are you, Kuno? His daughter stared up at him with something akin to a smile as he leaned down and gave her a kiss as he sealed the bottle back up. He held her close to him as he affectionately ruffled her hair as her eyes began to droop. He hoped they didn't have to walk for too long. Yasaka exhaled softly as she watched her latest guest getting escorted out of her office. Placing the pen in her hands down on her desk, she brought her hands up as she rubbed her temples with her fingers as she took this time as a short break. With a light shake of her head, she grabbed her cup that was half full of water and took a light sip. Her amber eyes slowly moved before coming to rest on the picture frame on top of her desk, which held a picture of herself and Naruto together. A soft smile played upon her face as she remembered where they had taken that one, though she made a note to get another picture and one which also had Kuno in it. That reminded her that both he and their daughter were currently not here as she had seen him off. She trusted Naruto to take care of Kuno and knew he would protect her with his life if needed. Initially she thought of letting a friend of hers watch over Kuno, but that wasn't necessary as it turned out. Once more a smile formed, though this one was brighter than the last, as finally, a couple days later, Kuno had finally called her mama. The joy that had spread through her was rivaled only back when she had told him she was pregnant. Her smile dropped, however, when a bright light made itself known right in her office, which she knew belonged to Amaterasu. So when the light died down, she didn't show any surprise as she gazed at the raven-haired sun goddess who greeted her with a smile. "Yasaka-chan, how are you?" "I'm fine, Amaterasu-sama. What brings you here?" "I have some news regarding where your partner is from. Is he here by any chance?" Yasaka shook her head, making the goddess frown. "Really? Where might he be then, as I thought he'd be here?" "He's currently with Kuno in the underworld as Sairoorg had invited him. He'll be back later today." "I see." Amaterasu muttered softly before she sat down on the chair that was already present. "Guess I could spend some time with you, if you don't mind, of course." Yasaka waved her hand, signaling that it was quite the opposite. "Oh no, I welcome it as I've been having a rather busy day." Sue smiled as she crossed one leg over the other. "So tell me, how have you been doing since I've last been here?" "Oh my, who's this cutie?" A woman's voice spoke up from behind him, prompting him to turn around before taking a step back as he came face to face with a blonde woman as her red eyes seemed to look him up and down. Who are you?" Naruto asked as he distanced himself from her as he hadn't met her before. "This is Koreana, she's my bishop," Sairoorg answered as he looked between the two. "Say, what's your name, handsome?" she asked him flirtatiously while licking her lips. "Naruto Uzumaki, friend of Sairoorg, who has invited me here," he said with a small smile as he didn't like how she was looking at him. So you're the friend he was talking about, huh? And whose is that?" "Your little sister." She looked at the sleeping form on Kuno he was holding. Naruto shook his head. "No, she's my daughter." Koreana took a step back at that revelation, looking him in the eyes to see if he was lying. Not finding anything, she turned to her king, who nodded his head. "He's speaking the truth. Her name is Kuno and she's his and Yasaka's daughter. So for your and my safety, please refrain from flirting with him." Koreana blinked before her eyes widened as she knew of Yasaka. Hell, who didn't know of the nine-tailed kitsune yukai that ruled Kyoto? Though she wasn't aware the woman had a lover or a daughter. She did know, however, that she wouldn't stand a chance against someone of her caliber, so she gave Naruto a shaky smile while she held her hand out. "Please excuse me for my earlier behavior. If I had known that it wouldn't have happened." Naruto smiled softly as he shook her hand. "It's fine. No harm was done and I understand that it's a part of your personality." He received a smile back from her before Sairoorg interrupted, telling the two to follow him inside. "Yokusha." Naruto greeted the other blonde who was already present. The queen of Sairoorg turned to look at them before greeting him with a smile. "Hello Naruto, nice to see you again. I see you brought little Kuno with you as well." "Yep." He sat down before carefully adjusting the sleeping form of Kuno, who snuggled deeper into him. He breathed out softly as he let out his ears and tails, surprising Koreana, who didn't expect that. "What?" Naruto asked her upon seeing her surprised face. "Is it that much of a surprise given who I am?" His tails moved to form a soft cushion for his back. I guess it shouldn't be too surprising given that you live in Kyoto." Koreana mumbled as she sat down as well. "Anyway, we won't be here for too long as today I'm showing him around. We'll be heading to Gremory territory next as I'll be visiting my cousin who I haven't seen in quite a while." "Your cousin?" Naruto asked as he thanked Kusha, who served him a glass of ice-cold water. "Yes." He crossed his arms with a nod. "She had been bugging me to see her. Rias is her name, and just a tip. I'd watch out for her as she's a huge Japanophile." "Japanophile?" Naruto looked confused. What Sairoorg means is that she's obsessed with anything Japanese. "Seriously, she's a female otaku." Kusha explained, making him release a soft, "Ah." "Guess that would be smart, but don't you think my name gives it away?" Sairoorg blinked before he hung his head as he was right. Naruto couldn't help but let a small chuckle escape his lips before Sairoorg stood up. "Let's greet the rest of my peerage who should be out in the back." "Sure." He finished up his water before he got up as Sairoorg led them out. A knock on the door made Yasaka pause her conversation with Amaterasu as she called for the person to enter. A single eyebrow rose as she watched one of her many men bow his head while holding something in his hand. "Sorry to interrupt Yasaka-sama, but we just received this message." He showed it to her, whose eyes narrowed as she recognized the symbol she spotted it held before motioning him to hand it over. He did so before bowing once more as he left her office. What's that?" Yasaka glanced at the goddess before she opened the letter and read its contents. Amaterasu watched intrigued as Yasaka's eyes narrowed more and more as she continued to read. She too had seen the symbol the letter held, but the name of which it belonged to escaped her at the moment. She was caught off guard as a growl escaped the vixen's throat as she let the letter fall onto her desk while her tail swayed behind her in agitation. "So, mind telling me what's wrong?" Yasaka slid the letter over to her, which she accepted. "I see. Yes, this is rather surprising as I never expected them to reach out. Especially with how prideful they normally are. Gumiho huh, haven't heard much of those for some time. I wonder what made them reach out now, as it's like you said. They are prideful, more than most Yukai clans." Yasaka hummed. "I guess arranging a meeting wouldn't hurt. Only to not show them any disrespect as what they're requesting is something I didn't expect. I remember them separating from us and heading towards Korea as they were unable to live in harmony with humans. Who's the person that sent it? It should be on the bottom. It says it was sent by Ari, who is the current head of the clan." "Ari," Yasaka repeated softly as she closed her eyes in an attempt to put in picture with the name. She opened her eyes moments later with a small frown as she had failed to do so. Not that it was her fault, as they, the Gumiho, mostly kept to themselves. I assume she must have only recently assumed her position as leader, as her name doesn't ring any bells. I think I have somewhat of an idea who she is, though I'll keep it to myself until it's confirmed for now." She sent Yasaka an apologetic smile as the blonde huffed. "Fine. But I will send out a letter that we're interested in a meeting. Perhaps this, Ari, isn't like her predecessors in that she sees value in living amongst humans and not just for food." "Smart decision, Yasaka. Their numbers are rather small, but their abilities are quite unique even amongst Yukai. They would be a fine addition if everything works out." Amaterasu then stood up. "It's been nice talking with you, but I need to head back. I'll be sure to visit sometime this week in hopes Naruto is here to discuss what has been discovered." Giving her a wave, her form glowed as she teleported away. Once she was alone, brushed away some blonde bangs before she opened her drawer, grabbed a white sheet of paper and her pen as she began to write a letter in return. She hoped something positive would be the outcome of this. "Damn. That's unnecessarily large," Naruto mumbled as he looked at the Gremory mansion. Next to him, Cyroorg smirked before he nudged his head forward, motioning for him to follow, which he did. Kuno, who was currently awake, was comfortably in his arms as her amber eyes peered curiously at her surroundings as they neared the mansion. Cyroorg walked up to the door before knocking on it. Once he had done so, he stepped back next to Naruto, who was currently looking around, finding the surrounding areas a bit more interesting. He turned his attention back, however, as the door was opened and a maid was there to greet them. "Ah, Cyroorg, we've been expecting you. Though, who is this?" The maid glanced at the blonde standing next to the bio. "He's a friend of mine from Kyoto that I'm showing around. We won't be here for long, just greeting my cousin and we'll be off." "I see." The maid responded after staring at the blonde for a moment longer, though he didn't seem bothered as he was busy with Kuno. "As long as you'll keep an eye on him, that's fine." The maid stepped to the side, allowing them entry as she closed the door behind them. Quite dark here. What's that?" "Yeah, I too find it quite gloomy as well, Kuno." A drop of sweat ran down Cyroorg's head as he looked at his friend who was conversing with Kuno despite making any noise. "But don't worry, with me here everything will be fine, as there's nothing I can't do," he declared boldly, which elicited giggles out of his daughter. Who are you?" A voice spoke up, prompting Naruto to turn around before looking down. His gaze landed on a little crimson-haired girl with blue eyes that stared up at him. "Huh?" was what came out of his mouth before Cyroorg stepped up. He watched as the little girl's eyes lit up as she ran towards Cyroorg, who welcomed her with open arms. "Era, looks like Rias is happy to see you." Another voice spoke up and Naruto turned his head as his eyes rested on the form of a young, long-haired girl with violet eyes around Rias' age. "Ah, Akano, how's my little cousin's queen doing today?" "I'm doing well," Akano answered before her gaze shifted to the blonde he had came with. "Who's this?" Yes, he let go of Rias, who made her way to her queen as she too looked at the spiky-haired blonde who merely stood there. "Rias, Akano, meet my friend Naruto Uzumaki. Naruto, meet my cousin Rias Gremory and her queen Akano Himejima." "Hello." Naruto greeted them kindly with a smile and a lazy wave of his hand. The girl, Rias, stared at him, humming as she inspected him before she suddenly appeared in front of him, and he swore he saw stars in her eyes as she looked at him. "Naruto Uzumaki? That sounds Japanese. Does that mean you are from Japan? If so, where do you live? What's it like? Is it better than here?" Naruto glanced at Cyroorg as the little crimson-haired girl continued with her barrage of questions while not giving him any time to respond. Even Kuno was staring at the girl who kept on babbling out words she was unable to comprehend. He. The Biel chuckled before he patted Ria's head, making her pause and pout at her cousin. Give him some room, Rias. I know you're a big fan of Japan, but you're not even allowing him to answer. Rias looked down at her cousin's words, and for a moment he wondered if he said anything wrong. His worries were proven to be unfounded as she perked right back and turned on her heels. Alright. Akeno, let's go. She looked over her shoulder back at them. Please follow us as we'll be moving to somewhere more comfortable. Naruto and Sairoorg shared a look before the latter shrugged as he marched after her. Not having any choice, Naruto did the same, as it wouldn't be good to walk on his own in a place he didn't know the owners of. Rias, Akeno? Naruto heard a more mature woman's voice coming from up ahead. What are you two doing here? Weren't you two in your room? Sairoorg came over, mother, and he brought a friend with him? Really? Another voice, this one clearly male, was heard. They should be here any second now, father. Just as Rias said, the door opened as Sairoorg entered, who they greeted before their attention landed on the blonde that entered the room behind him. Upon entering, Naruto quickly glanced at the two older devils that were in the room. Immediately he understood where both Rias and Sirzax had gotten their looks from, as he looked at the person he assumed was Lord Gremory and their father, who had their children's long crimson red hair and their eyes. The woman, a brunette that was their mother, stood next to the man as her violet eyes regarded him curiously. Ah, Sairoorg, haven't seen you in a while. How are you doing? Ria's mother asked as she glanced at her nephew. I'm doing fine, Lady Gremory, Lord Gremory. I'm showing my friend around and decided to visit Rias for a bit as she's bugging me to do so. Ria's mother hummed. I see. You mind introducing him to us then? And how many times do I have to tell you that Venelana or Auntie is fine? Ah ha ha. He laughed sheepishly. Sorry, Auntie. He then put a hand on his friend's shoulder as he brought him forward. Anyway, this is my friend Naruto, who's from Kyoto. Sairoorg introduced him as he noticed Ria's interest was piqued at the mention of Kyoto, though held back her excitement as her mother took the moment to speak. Kyoto, really? Well, nice to meet you, Naruto-san. I'm Venelana Gremory and this is my husband, Zeoticus Gremory. She introduced kindly before looking at the infant he was holding in his arms, whose amber eyes looked curiously around the room. If you don't mind me asking, but who is the little one you're holding? Is she your sister, niece, or? Naruto smiled at the woman as she trailed off before shaking his head. She's neither of those, Lady Gremory. Her name is Kuno and she is my daughter. Clearly that wasn't what she expected, as he caught the brief widening of her eyes as she looked him up and down before her attention went back to Kuno, who stared right back at her. Your daughter? Venelana repeated, wondering if she heard him correct as he looked young. She couldn't sense any demonic energy coming from his, so he wasn't a devil who are capable of changing their age and appearance. Fallen or angel were out of the question, as they would have long since sensed any holy energy he might have, though he did say he was from Kyoto, which left Yukai, and that was a large possibility. Forgive me for asking, but you look rather young. Mind telling us how old you are? I'm 18, my birthday was quite recently. He could tell they were surprised by his answer. Even Rias and Akeno sent him a surprised look, to which he smiled. My, that's quite young to be a father. And who's the mother? Naruto looked at both Lord and Lady for a moment before he answered. Her mother is Yasaka, leader of the Yukai in Kyoto and Nine-Tailed Fox. A sound escaped Lord Gremory's throat at the revelation of Kunu's mother as Venelana placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. Recollecting himself, the crimson-haired man looked back at the boy who had managed to ensnare the elusive Yasaka, a woman that was wanted by many of the supernatural world. He himself had tried to add her to his harem, as Yasaka was as beautiful as she was strong, but was met with harsh rejection from her back then. Though that hadn't stopped him, as he tried several times more before finally cutting his losses. But to find out that this boy, not even an adult, had mated with her and even produced a daughter with her was more than a little shocking. However, when he looked back at the blonde, he was in for another surprise, as now, swaying behind him, were 5 long, golden foxtails with a matching pair of ears sticking out between his hair. A squeal was heard and they looked at Rias, who was holding herself back as she was fixated with the furry appendages behind him. A fox Yukai, interesting. Lord Gremory commented, which was met with a nod from his wife. The two stood up then as they looked at their daughter. We'll be attending our own business, so we will leave you 4 alone for now, as that's what you initially came for, right? Regardless, it was nice meeting you and we might meet again in the future. They exited the room and Naruto took the opportunity to sit down. He jumped a bit as it felt like he was getting sucked into the couch the moment he sat down, before he let it be, as it turned out to be quite comfortable. Looking up, he was once more taken back as Rias had somehow crossed the distance without him noticing and was now on her knees sitting on the couch next to him. Hi, he started, unsure what to say as he had an idea of what was to come after being warned about her. Hi, Rias chirped all too happily. So, about those questions you asked earlier. I think this is about the best time to receive answers, so go ahead. The little girl's eyes visibly lit up with joy at the prospect, and she didn't waste any time to get going. Well, can you show me a picture of your wife? Naruto blinked at the question, as it was one he didn't expect her to ask, especially not with the one she had shot at him before. I don't mind, though we aren't married yet. Rias looked up at him questioningly, so he elaborated as he fished out his phone. I only had known Yasaka and we were together for a rather short period when she found out she was pregnant. While it wasn't planned, neither she nor I regret it in the slightest though. He gently caressed Kunu's cheek while sporting a soft smile. I plan on marrying her in the future of course, as while we both love each other we didn't find it necessary for Yukai being mates as the equivalent. When Kuno is a bit older I plan on asking her, so it will be something she too can remember. He pulled up a picture of himself and Yasaka when she was a couple months pregnant up before showing it to Rias and Akeno, who too had become curious. The two girls marveled at the picture of the beautiful blonde who radiated happiness that could almost be felt despite it being a picture. She's beautiful, Rias commented with her friend agreeing as she nodded. Naruto smiled at her before he put his phone back. Thank you. Anything else you'd like to know? Aha. She nodded her head up and down. Can you tell us what Kyoto is like? Sure. Do we have enough time for that though? He looked at Cyroorg, who nodded his head, signaling that they could stay here for a bit. Huh, guess it won't hurt. I suggest you get a bit comfortable as I have quite a lot to tell you. Rias and Akeno did what he asked, and once he saw they were ready he began, telling him as much as he could while also keeping it not too boring, as he doubted they wanted to know about that. They had left the Gremory mansion not too long ago, having stayed quite a bit longer than they had originally intended. Currently he was being shown around as they were in a shopping district, which would be the last place Cyroorg decided to show him before he would head back, as time had gone by much quicker than he had thought. He gazed into the window belonging to a jewelry store, his blue eyes darting from side to side to see if anything caught his interest. Something did catch his attention, however it wasn't from the store itself. From the corner of his eyes he watched a dark-haired girl. He guessed she was around his age, sneak up to one of the many food vendors that stood on these streets. He watched as the girl did something with her hands before she snatched up some food that the vendor was selling, after which she ran towards one of the nearby alleys. While normally he wouldn't care much about what he had just seen, he was fairly sure he sensed a slight amount of chakra from the girl, and he swore he saw she had ears and a tail. Knowing that there was a possibility that she was a Yukai and Yasaka would be rather upset if he didn't help them, he looked at Cyroorg before telling him that he was going to check something out real quick before calmly making his way toward the same alley he had seen the girl enter. Entering the alley he raised an eyebrow as he saw it was empty with the exception of a dumpster that belonged to the building it was next to, while also being a dead end. He took a few more steps before pausing as a shuffling noise reached his ears. What followed was a pair of cat ears along with two amber eyes that peeked at him from behind the dumpster, watching him cautiously while doing so. His earlier assumption of the girl being a Yukai was proven correct, and he flashed the feline a soft smile to ease her worries. Hello there, little kitten. Don't worry, as I'm not here to hurt you. I caught you stealing from that person back there. He saw fear shining in the little cat's eyes but kept smiling softly. Don't worry, I care little for that, as I understand how hard it must be to live on the streets. Can you please come out and show yourself? You're a Yukai, right? I promise I won't hurt you. He released his own ears and tails as a sign that he was being truthful. See, I'm a Yukai myself who is visiting the underworld with my daughter. He looked down to the sleeping form of Kuno. Please reveal yourself, as I have an offer that I'm sure you would like. The black feline kept staring at him for a bit longer before her form was encompassed in a glow, and when it died down, in place of the cat stood a young woman with long, raven-colored hair and amber eyes. She was naked as the day she was born and used an arm to cover her bust and her tails. He noticed she had two of them, covered her private parts. There, the girl began. What do you want, NYA? He smiled at the verbal tick that was rather cute even if she was still on guard. First, please tell me your name. I'm Uzumaki Naruto and this is my daughter, Kuno. Kuroka, no last name. Naruto nodded. Now, Kuroka, I'm offering you if you want to come with me to Kyoto. Yasaka, he saw recognition flash in her eyes. I see you know of her, which is good. Yasaka is the mother of the little ball of sunshine I'm holding and my mate. As leader of Kyoto Yukai faction, she wants the best for all of them, which living on the streets definitely isn't that, and she would be quite unhappy if I would leave you behind. Especially since from those tales I can tell you are a neko show. So Kuroka, do you want to come with me? To live under a roof and not having to steal food to feed your little sister? He saw her tense up as he mentioned the latter. How do you know that, NYA? She hissed dangerously, and he kept his soft smile. I can easily tell you weren't stealing that food for yourself, not to mention that now that I'm standing here I can sense a faint presence behind that dumpster. I know you don't really trust me, even after what I told you. Kuroka nodded. But this isn't about me. This is about the safety of both yourself and your little sister, as it's only a matter of time before a devil stumbles upon you who would want to add you to their peerage, as you are quite beautiful. He laughed softly as he saw her cheeks flush. He didn't lie though. While Yasaka still was the most beautiful woman he had ever laid his eyes on, Kuroka was definitely second place, as she had everything in the right places. So, he held one hand out for her to take. Do you want me to bring you two to safety? Have proper housing, clothing, and allow your younger sister to attend school? Have friends of her own? I promise you will have everything I just said and more, and I don't go back on my promises. Kuroka contemplated his offer as she looked at his outstretched hand, to his face, her eyes scanning his before glancing down her side where a small white cat was currently asleep beneath pieces of cardboard. Finding nothing but kindness in his eyes, she slowly stepped closer before placing her own hand in his while looking up in his eyes. "I accept NYA. Please take care of me and Sharon." Naruto guessed Sharon was the name of her little sister and softly rubbed her hand with his thumb as he nodded before softly making his way to the back of the dumpster where his eyes landed on the partially hidden white kitten curled into itself. Carefully he bent down before he reached out, all under Kuroka's watchful eyes as he stroked its white fur a few times. Once he was sure it was soundly asleep, he picked her up with one hand before placing her with Kuno. The small white kitten shuffled a bit before it stopped as it made itself comfortable at the heat Kuno gave off. Seeing this, Kuroka allowed a smile of her own before the blonde turned to her. "You mind turning back into your cat form? It'll be much easier to bring you along if you weren't a naked girl." Kuroka nodded before she removed her hand from covering her breast, flashing him and giving him a wink before her form glowed once more as she shrunk. Back in her cat form, Kuroka clawed her way up to his shoulder using his clothes while wrapping her tails around his neck to make sure she wasn't going to fall off. "Ready?" Kuroka meowed and rubbed her cheek against his, which he took as a sign that she was. "Good, I'll inform Siroorg, the person who is showing me around, that I had fun, but it's time for me to head back. Yasaka will be delighted to see me and I'll introduce you to her." "Alright NYA. Let's go." He nodded as he lightly nudged Kuroka before he walked out of the alley towards Siroorg, who had apparently ordered something to eat. "Naruto," Siroorg called out to his friend as he was indulging himself with food. "I was waiting for you, and where did you get those two cats from?" He stopped mid-sentence as he took note of the black and white felines that were with him. "I found these two scurrying around in the trash back there and couldn't leave them like that. I'll be taking these with me to Kyoto as Yasaka would be delighted to have some pets." "NYA," Kuroka mewled as she licked Naruto's cheek, which was a bit weird in Naruto's opinion if you remembered that she was an actual girl and not a real cat. "Huh, I see then. I guess you'll be heading home?" A nod was his answer. "Yup, if I go now I should be back in Kyoto in around an hour or so as I can't really travel fast with these three with me." "I understand. I'll walk with you though I can't join as I'll be having another training session with my peerage and I." "Alright, next time we'll meet we're going to have another spar though. Haven't let loose in a while and I usually don't fight back against Yasaka despite how much she loves beating me into the ground." Siroorg just laughed. "Naruto-kun, are you back?" "Yes, I'm in the living room Yasaka-chan." The soft sound of footsteps heading his was reached his ears, smiling as he watched Yasaka come into view. Wearing a smile of her own, she walked up to him to embrace him before she paused herself as she took note of the two felines he had with him that she didn't see before. "Era, who are they?" she asked as she eyed the black and white cats he had with him. The black feline that was on his shoulder graciously hopped down before it glowed and grew in size. Yasaka held a dull expression as the black cat transformed into a busty young woman with cat ears and two tails and even winked at her. "Nice to meet you. I'm Kuroka NYA." "Naruto." The blonde in question swallowed as he fearfully met her eyes. "Yes? Why is there a naked neko show in our living room?" I can explain Yasaka. I promise." She gave him a look that told him to talk, which he did. He told her he found these two while in the underworld when he caught Kuroka stealing before he tried to talk with her. There. He explained who he was and if they would want to come with him to Kyoto as they wouldn't last long in the underworld. Especially since they were nekosho, which are rare subspecies of the nekomata. "Not to mention that I know that you wouldn't want me to leave them behind as they should be under our care as that is our job as leader." Once he finished his explanation, her expression softened before she turned her attention to the dark-haired nekosho who had taken the white kitten from Naruto's arms into her own. "I see, I understand now. Kuroka was it? And the white kitten is your younger sister?" She received a nod. "Correct Yasaka-sama, her name is Sharon NYA." Kuroka answered as she held the little kitten close to her. "Well, after what Naruto-kun just told me about you I can understand why he did it and I'm glad he did. It would be a shame if you two would end up in the hands of a devil as I can see you love your little sister very much." Yasaka then looked her up and down. "Though I'll have to give you something to wear as you're quite distracting like that." Clothes? Why NYA? Kuroka paused before glancing at Naruto who stole a glance at her every now and then and smirked. "I understand. You're afraid I'll steal him from you, NYA?" Yasaka scoffed. "As if, I just don't want you to run around here without clothes and it's my house, my rules." Kuroka glowered. "Fine, though I want something comfortable like a kimono NYA." "That can be done. Now excuse me as I'll be grabbing a kimono for you and when I'll be back we'll discuss living arrangements and what's going to happen next." "Sure," Kuroka replied before she plopped herself down on the couch, Naruto too occupied. Yasaka sent the nekosho one last glance before she left the room. "She's not what I expected NYA," Kuroka said once she was sure she was out of reach. "Ho? What did you expect as I understand you know of her?" "Not really. I only knew of her name, I had never seen her in person before NYA. Still, I can see the stories of her beauty weren't exaggerated. NYA. You must be really lucky. Naruto hummed to her words as he listened to her speak while his gaze was on Kuno's sleeping form. I guess you could say that, and you aren't the first person to say so. But you're right, she's the most beautiful woman I've laid my eyes on, and I'm glad to have her. A moment of silence settled between the two. The only sounds that were heard were those of soft purrs that came from Sharon as Kuroka combed her fingers through her fur, and the light sounds that would escape from Kuno every now and then. Shortly thereafter, Yasaka returned, a kimono he recognized as one of her own in her hand, which she handed over to the nekosho, who carefully placed Sharon next to her on the couch as she put it on. She wiggled around a bit once she did so before nodding her head, as it still gave her enough room to move while the kimono itself was rather comfortable. Seeing as she was satisfied, Yasaka herself sat down next to Naruto before leaning into him, who welcomed her with a kiss as he handed Kuno over to her mother. Now that's done, let's get to business and see what we're going to do with the two of you. Kuroka gave a nod as Yasaka began to explain the basics of how things worked here in Kyoto. And while she did that, Naruto created a clone which he gave a command to start on dinner for 4, as he assumed the two nekosho would be eating with them for now, that is. Naruto smiled as he woke up in what must have been his favorite place, which was with his head resting between Yasaka's soft breast. It was a place any man would kill for, as it were truly paradise on earth, and it was all for him. His blue eyes moved up, glancing at Yasaka, his love, and the peaceful expression resting on her face. She was asleep still. Her hands unconsciously combing through his blonde locks, which brought forth the urge to purr, though he squashed that quickly. Snuggling deeper in her bosom, he leaned his head a bit forward, pressing his lips to the side of her breast as he gave it a wet, sloppy kiss along with a good suck here and there as he began to make out with it. Naru, Yasaka's soft whimper reached his ears, and he felt her fingers grip his hair and hold him closer. Not that he would have let up without her though, as he marked her with a hickey once he pulled his lips back. He gave the now visible red mark a couple long licks before blowing cold air on it. A gasp was heard, and he looked up to see Yasaka staring right back at him, awake. Her amber eyes were half-lidded while she sent him a sinful smile. "Morning," came her throaty whisper as she breathed deeply. "Morning, Yasaka-chan." He moved up to greet her with a kiss she happily returned before he rolled them over so she was laying on top of him. He relished in the feeling of skin against skin. It was something he couldn't get enough of. Especially not with a smoking hot vixen such as her. Yasaka began showering his face in kisses. Starting from his jaw and slowly moving up before purposely avoiding his own lips as she went around it, even as he glared at her for doing so. Having teased him enough, she moved to lock their lips, and just as she was about to do so, the door was kicked open as a black-haired nekosho waltzed inside like she owned the place. "Morning, NYA," she cheerfully said, completely ignoring the looks the two sent her way. Especially Yasaka's glare that could have burned her on the spot. "Right, forgot about that," Naruto mused as he glanced at Kuroka, who looked at them expectantly. After yesterday's events and having gotten to know the other a bit better, he and Yasaka had allowed the two to stay here for the night until they would get everything sorted out as their living arrangements and signing up her little sister for school. The problem, however, was that Kuroka had little to no understanding to live on her own or with her sister. She didn't know how to cook. She was, in her own words, a lazy cat. The fact that she had lived on the streets and taking care of her little sister had given her no option of going to school either. She wasn't stupid or anything, but the matters she had knowledge of were rather illegal. "Guess it's time to get up, as I'm sure you're hungry. Can you check up on Kuno?" He looked at his mate and lover, who gave a nod that earned her a smile. The two shared a quick yet passionate kiss before she rolled off him, got out of bed and put on a kimono to hide her modesty. Naruto looked at Kuroka, who noticed and looked away, which allowed him to put on a kimono as well, which he closed somewhat loosely where it showed some skin from his neck down and some of his chest. "Come, Kuroka," he told her as he walked past her out of the room and towards the kitchen, while she quickly followed after him as she wanted some food. A little while later, the four of them, or five depending on Kuno, were seated at the table eating the breakfast Naruto had conjured up. From the looks on the two nekoshu's faces, it was quite good as they munched it down in record speeds. Yasaka and Naruto ate at a much calmer pace, while the former was also holding Kuno, which resulted in Naruto creating a clone to take the little girl from her, much to the surprise of Kuroka, who hadn't seen his abilities before. She was intrigued as she had both seen and heard of clone techniques before, but those usually mere more of an illusion as opposed to physical like the one she was saying. She also sensed a small burst of chakra as he did that and wondered if it was something she could learn. Naruto-kun? Yasaka spoke up as she swallowed a mouthful of food, getting the attention of the blonde, who looked at her with a small smile. "Yes. I received a message yesterday while you were gone from the Gumiho, which are a small group of fox yokai located in Korea that had split ways quite a long time ago due to differences regarding how they see and act with humans. Anyway, they are interested in arranging a meeting as they apparently want to merge and move to Kyoto." Naruto paused mid-bite as he looked thoughtful. "Gumiho? I think I might have read a bit about them. Don't they feed on humans? Their essences at least, or so it was stated. They charm someone, usually their target, before, well, sucking out their life energy." Is it really wise to have them here in Kyoto, amongst all these humans? Yasaka nodded to his words. Don't worry, as I've thought about that as well. I even discussed this with Amaterasu-sama, who came over, which reminds me that she wanted to talk to you, by the way. Back to the point. It seems like they have a new clan head, I guess, who goes by the name of Ari, who was also the one that reached out. From little that I know is that she's young but experienced and wants to try to live among humans, and not just for their life force, as it's estimated they would die out completely within a few generations due to the lack of mating. Well, if you put it like that, I can see where they're coming from. I assume you want to at least have a meeting? Yasaka nodded. I think that's smart, as well as more yukai here in Kyoto is always better. Now, what's this about Amaterasu? Well, she wanted to speak to you, as she said it had to do with where you came from, but that's pretty much it. She didn't want to reveal it without you being there as well. Naruto's eyes briefly widened before they returned to their usual state. I see, I'll try to contact her later then to hear what she has to say. And with that he went back to finish up his food. Throughout their conversation, Kuroka stayed silent as she listened in and managed to get a slight understanding what they were talking about. Nonetheless, she was rather surprised that they had actual contact with one of the Shinto goddesses, the strongest one at that. Deities usually kept to themselves, though there were rumors the yukai were much closer to the gods and goddesses of their religion than others. She then looked at her younger sister, who had her plate clean to the point of not even any crumbles were present. Not that she would blame her, as the food he had prepared was truly delicious, unlike anything she had tasted before. We're finished, NYA. Kuroka informed the two blondes, who looked at both of them and their plates. Good, if you bring your plates to the kitchen you're free to leave. You'll be given some money later so you can buy clothes for both yourself and Sharon, as aside from kimonos we have none in either of your sizes. Kuroka was surprised by the kindness she had been showed, as it was so different compared to the underworld. Looking at the two, she bowed her head with her ears twitching. Thank you, NYA. She then turned to her sister. Come Sharon, let them to themselves while I'll read you another story back in the bedroom. She grabbed both their plates before heading to the kitchen, while the white-haired Nekosho ran towards the room she and Kuroka had shared upon hearing she would read her another story. She liked stories. Don't blame her. Yasaka and Naruto were done shortly thereafter before deciding to put on some different clothes in order to get ready for the day. The two of them exited their bedroom. Yasaka was clothed in her usual Miko outfit, while Naruto wore a light-colored kimono with a high collar and a gray sash that fitted well with the kimono itself. The two walked into the living room, where he sauntered up to his clone and took his daughter from it before handing it some money and telling it to nay out for shopping. The clone didn't complain, but one of his eyes twitched to show it would rather do something else. Let's go. Yasaka called to him as she gently took one arm with her own as the two walked out to begin the day. Meanwhile, Naruto's clone knocked on the door of the bedroom Kuroka and Sharon occupied. It waited for a few seconds before it was opened, and he was met with Kuroka, who stared up at him. NYA? She questioned as to what he was here for and got a smile in return. Shopping for clothes, remember? I've been given the task to help, as I doubt you know where everything is. Kuroka's eyes lit up as she remembered before turning confused. Task? What do you mean, NYA? I may clone as Yasaka and the real Naruto have left just now. Don't worry though, as when I dispel, the real one receives all the memories I'll have accumulated. Whoa, amazing nya. Kuroka said in awe at what she had just been told. If it would really work as he just explained, then she hoped she could learn it and that he would be willing to teach her, as the possibilities were almost endless. She would be able to do twice the amount of things in the same time, or more perhaps, depending on how taxing it was, though the blonde didn't look bothered when he had created one, but that might be due to how large his reserves were. She wondered if something else was large as well. She blushed brightly as she was reminded on what she had walked into earlier this morning before shaking her head. Wait here, NYA. Sharon, and I will get ready. Naruto raised an eyebrow at the "get ready" part, but complied nonetheless as she closed the door and he could hear their muffled voices from inside. The door was opened a minute or two later as both Nekosho sisters stepped out and looking ready to go. He eyed them both before humming. Good, let's go and get the two of you some actual clothes. Especially you. He looked at Sharon, who had her hand held by Kuroka, as the two of them followed after him. Outside, he led them to one of the several clothing stores around Kyoto, though this one specialized in clothes that would fit in nicely here. Kimonos mainly, as Kuroka had let him know she liked those as they allowed a lot of movement and felt less restrained. Her flexibility she had as a Nekosho was able to be put to use, unlike if she wore jeans and a shirt, which would only hinder it. A few looks were sent their way here and there as they walked, mostly because of the two with him as they were new, but one could clearly sense they were yukai as well. He paid them no mind though, and telling them to do the same. Reaching the store he had led them to, he allowed them to enter first as he followed after them. Hello, Misaka. Naruto greeted the woman who was present, who flashed him a smile as she walked over to them. She was the owner of the store and an acquaintance, as he often came here for his casual clothes that they had here. Good morning, Naruto-kun, what brings you here? Naruto gestured to the two Nekosho with them. I need some clothes for these two here. Regular outfits and school clothes for Sharon. He patted the white-haired girl on her hand. while Kuroka is interested in a couple kimonos. He looked at the ravenet who was looking around curiously. Misaka nodded in understanding before kneeling down to share one's height with a kind smile. I'm going to have to get your measurements, which is done in the back. Sharon looked unsure, though a nod from her older sister made her hesitantly accept with a nod as Misaka stood back up and led her to the back of the shop. Hey, Naruto felt Kuroka poking him and looked at her. You said the real one experiences what you do after dispelling, correct? He nodded. Good. She smiled before grabbing his arm and dragging him over towards the adult section as her body was not fitting for such childish clothes, especially not with her measurements. Stopping abruptly, she pushed him back onto a chair as she went ahead and looked through everything that was present, taking whatever she found nice looking or thought so at least. Once she had her arms full, she entered the fitting room, leaving the clone to guess what's going to happen next. His fears were proven true as Kuroka exited the fitting room while wearing a light blue kimono that hugged her body nicely as she did a twirl. "NYA, what do you think?" She stuck a few poses while moving around a bit to test her mobility while wearing it. Not sure how to answer without upsetting either her or the real Naruto, the clone settled for a thumbs up, which made her beam before she quickly entered the fitting room again. As he was left, Alanehe shuffled nervously in his seat in hope she won't be showing him anything revealing aside from kimonos, or else his creator might become upset. Meanwhile, with the real Naruto and Yasaka, they were in her office and in conversation with Amaterasu, who had appeared not even a minute ago. The woman looking as radiant as ever as she greeted them with her warm smile. "Yasaka-chan, Naruto-kun, you called for me?" "Yes, Amaterasu," Naruto answered. "Yasaka-chan told me you were here yesterday for me to talk about something regarding where I'm from." The sun goddess nodded. "That's correct, and I'm happy to see you've called for me this soon." "No problem. Now, mind telling us what's it about?" Of course, she made herself more comfortable as she crossed one leg over the other while doing so. "So, the reason I wanted to talk to you was about the phenomenon that was the cause for all of you currently here. After informing my fellow gods and goddesses about all of you along with just how you ended up here." "Oh, and what have you found, if anything?" "Well, what we found is that there have been two more similar events that have happened. One was recently and happened in the northern region of Japan. Unfortunately, we were unable to find who it brought through, but what we are sure of is that it's someone from where you are originally from, as the energy sensed in the area was a match to the one here. While important, it's the other one that is much more interesting to us, at least, as this one happened in Italy near the Vatican. That one happened somewhere between 15 to 20 years ago. We're unsure exactly when, as information is guarded tightly, nor do we know who was brought here." "I see," Naruto mumbled as he furrowed his brows in thought. So according to her, there were at least two more people of his world here. And while they were more interested in the one that appeared almost 2 decades ago, it was the other way for him. It was someone who survived Madara's resurrection for quite some time. It wasn't Madara himself, that was sure, as the Biju in him would have already sensed him, and he wasn't sure if he could handle him from what he had been told of the man. "Is there anything else, like, has there been discovered what the cause of it is? It would be worrisome if it's something that can be recreated, as there are certain people that wouldn't be good to have here." A shake of her head was his response. "No, not yet. We've been looking into what it requires in order to see if it can be replicated, or at least to see what the connection between two worlds is. Not sure if I should glad or not that it can't be replicated by a person. While this is my home, I don't think I want to see them plunder the other world into chaos while simultaneously bringing over some unsavory people." "Yes, this, Madara, correct. Don't worry though, as we won't attempt something even if we could. While deities usually don't interfere with humans and the like, we would if there's an actual threat to be taken care of. Of course, that is if any of the other 3 factions act first." Naruto winced at this as he imagined someone reincarnating someone like Madara into their peerage. That would be very dangerous for both parties, as he could tell that Madara was not someone that liked to be owned by anyone. Naruto then stiffened before closing his eyes, and breathing S of his clone reached him, informing him that he was done with buying clothes and also everything else he had seen which involved Kuroka. "Naruto-kun." Yasaka touched his arm upon noticing what he was doing. "I'm fine, Yasaka. Just received the memories of my clone and what has happened." The blonde raised an eyebrow. "And what happened that earned such a reaction?" Naruto fought down a blush as images of Kuroka flashing his clone appeared in his mind. Just Kuroka was being playful, I guess?" He sounded unsure as he glanced at Yasaka, whose eyes hardened. "I see." He flinched lightly at her voice before taking her hand in her own and rubbing circles with his thumb. "Calm down, Yasaka-chan. Nothing happened. She just tried on different kimonos and had my clone give its opinion, that's all." He brought her hand and kissed her fingers as he didn't want her to do anything she might end up regretting. Amaterasu watched this in silence before speaking up once she seemed a bit calmer. "Kuroka? Who might that be?" "She's a nekosho. I saved both her and her younger sister from the streets when I was in the underworld yesterday. As someone who had lived on the streets myself when I was younger, and I couldn't let someone else go through it as well, so I offered them to come with me to Kyoto." "Nekosho? There aren't many around of those these days. Smart decision before they would end up with the devil household." Naruto nodded in agreement to her words, as it was that exact thought process that he went through when he first saw them. Yep, Yasaka and I are now looking what to do next, as we're unsure about letting them live alone due to Kuroka's lack of ability to properly take care of her. She has no formal education due to taking care of her little sister, and most her skills revolve around illegal activities such as pickpocketing and whatnot. The goddess hummed. I can see where that might come as a problem. So are you two taking care of them now? I then? A pair of nods was their answer. She then glanced at the clock that was present, and noticing she had already been here for longer than she initially thought. Well, it's good to have that done, but it's time for me to return to Takamagahara. Oh, and have you sent a message back to the Gumiho yet, Yasaka? The vixen shook her head negative. No, not yet Amaterasu-sama. I was going to get to it today though. Do that please. I hope next time I will visit again there will be good news. Later Yasaka-chan. Naruto-kun and Yuto Kuno-chan. The two gave her a small bow in respect as they watched her teleport out of the room. Silence then reigned after she left. Naruto still holding Yasaka's hand from earlier, though neither seemed to really mind. Though it didn't stay silent for too long as Kuno suddenly burst into tears. Food? He looked at Yasaka, who shook her head as Naruto held her in his arms. He then stood up as he began to sway from side to side, something that seemed to work as her loud cries slowly died down. He let his warm, life-filled chakra rise to the surface and bathe her in it along with the rest of the room as Yasaka purred softly as it coated her in a warm blanket. Snapping out of it, she smiled at him before she got to work on writing a letter back to state her response to the Gumiho in wanting to meet them soon. Naruto-kun? Naruto turned to her as he got Kuno back to sleep. His tails came free as he placed her in a basket made out of them as he sat back down. After I finish this, you mind taking over for me? I'll be checking up with the other Mikos one the Yasaka shrine. Sure, I don't mind if want to. Should be a rather calm day today and I can handle that. Yasaka beamed as she leaned over to kiss him. Thank you Naruto-kun. It was early in the evening and Naruto could be seen walking through the Gion district as he made his way to the shrine Yasaka was named after, as he had finished up his daily work not too long ago. He held Kuno in his arms with her facing outwards, allowing her curious amber eyes to look around as opposed to usually holding her facing him. The closer he got, the more and more shrine maidens he came across, each of them smiling and waving towards him. If it wasn't for his hands being occupied he would have waved back, so he settled for just giving them a smile. He had sent a clone towards their home to not leave Kuroka and Sharon alone too long, while also hoping they didn't do anything. Quicker than he had expected he arrived at the shrine, which he entered without second thoughts before seeing his beloved vixen already there in a seiza position as she was burning incense. Yasaka-chan. He watched as she turned her head to face them as a smile broke out on her face upon seeing the two. She got up from her kneeling position and made her way over to him, who welcomed her with a soft kiss. Disconnecting from her lips with a small sigh, Naruto directed a glare at a couple of boys that not so inconspicuously were ogling at Yasaka in a way only he was allowed before they quickly looked away after seeing his glare. Mama. Kuno reached her arms out to her as he allowed her to take their daughter from his arms, who quickly squashed her against her chest. Yasaka couldn't get enough of hearing Kuno call her that, though that was nothing compared to the first time she had done so. Oh Kuno, how I've missed you. She continued to dote over her, rubbing her cheek against Kuno's and kissing her nose before she held her close with one arm and the other was locked around Naruto's own. Let's go home Naruto-kun. She received a nod in agreement from her fellow blonde and looked down to see Kuno was holding onto her haori with her small hands as they moved. Unfortunately though, they weren't able to walk home in peace, as halfway there they were interrupted as someone called out his name. Oi, Naruto. The two paused in their steps before turning towards the source of the voice that called out for him. It was Sakura, who was accompanied with the other girls from their world. Yes Sakura? Naruto asked, somewhat annoyed at being stopped, something he let know with the tone of his voice. Though if she had noticed, she did a good job of not letting it show, as she opted for sending them a smile as the others looked at her. We're wondering how you've been. None of us have really seen you in a while and you don't really communicate with us, while Sasuke-kun had decided to travel for an unknown amount of time. He could tell she was upset even if she did her best to hide it. He could pretty much feel it from her. Ah, so that's what this is about. He could have sworn he had a similar conversation with them before. But if that's what it takes for it to get through her thick skull, then it would be rude not to help, no? Sakura, I've told you before, but I'm doing fine. My priorities currently lie with my family before everything. You should find a hobby or something. Hell, start traveling yourself if you want to really. I've come to realize that I've grown out of it, with it being the connections we shared. You could even start dating like Tamari over there with Shikamaru, unless you're still after Sasuke, in which I'd wish you good luck if he ever returns. Now if we're done, excuses, as we have to go back. Have to make sure our two guests aren't going crazy all by themselves. He wished them goodbye before they continued their walk home. Meanwhile, on the other side of the city, a man entered Kyoto. His long, spiky white hair that reached his hips and red lines then ran from his eyes down to his chin garnered attention from all that laid their eyes on him. The man himself didn't seem to care about any of them though. No, instead he was shamelessly ogling anyone he could get his eyes on. As long as they were of legal age, of course. With speeds that made it look like it materialized from nothingness, a notebook appeared in the man's hand followed by a pencil in the other. He let loose a set of giggles, the sound making the nearby woman shiver as they made sup in fear of letting his eyes feast on them. Something about the sound of his giggling made them rather wary as their senses told them to stay far away as possible. That didn't seem to bother the man in the slightest, however. In fact, it looked like he wasn't even paying attention and instead furiously scribbling down the notebook he was holding, taking brief pauses to wipe his nose from what little blood that was leaking. He then snapped the book shut without a warning, a serious expression resting on his face. His action made everyone that had stopped to stare at him quickly move on, as there was something about his stance coupled with expression that screamed dangerous to their minds. "This is Kyoto, huh?" the man mused as he looked around. "This is fantastic. With the inspiration I can tell that it's a bestseller in the making, especially if the rumors I picked up on this Yasaka person are true that her beauty is otherworldly." He couldn't help but giggle once more as his perverted imagination ran wild. With much trouble he managed to get himself under control, telling himself it was just a matter of time, as apparently this place had some of the best hot springs in the country. Hot springs plus beautiful naked women means massive payday. But for now he was going to check himself in a hotel, as he planned on staying here for a while. Panting along with an occasional whimper resounded in the room, joining the rhythmic sounds of flesh meeting flesh as Naruto took her from behind. Her back was arched, fingers digging in the sheets beneath them as she moaned, unrestrained. Small beams of light filtering through from the moon high in the night sky, allowing Naruto to see the sheen layer of sweat that covered the back of the woman writhing beneath him as he continued his thrust. "Yes. Right there, Naru. Fuck." Yasaka let out a pleasure-filled cry, actively pushing back into his thrust as he kept touching all the sensitive spots inside of her. Her amber eyes, half-lidded and clouded with lust, were staring blankly ahead of her as her mind was completely focused on the sensations she was experiencing. HNNG. A brief whimper left her lips as he buried himself completely inside of her with one hard thrust that managed to touch her cervix. She bucked her hips as he had stopped moving for a moment before feeling him rest his body on hers. His hands coming around and grabbing onto her large breasts that were swaying due to her labored breathing. Sinking his fingers in her ample mounds, Naruto restarted his thrust, pulling out almost completely and reveling at how her slick walls were trying to suck him back in before complying as he buried himself back inside of her with a single firm thrust. Growling, Naruto moved his head down as he licked at her neck, his tongue trailing upwards, unbothered by the drops of sweat covering her before surprising her as he bit her. Not hard enough to draw blood, but enough for a shockwave of pleasure to shoot through her body. Judging from how tightly her walls clamped down onto his cock, it was a success, though that didn't stop him from continuing his long and deep strokes inside of her. I'm close. Yasaka, he growled into her ear before nibbling on it. Just a bit more, Yasaka managed to wheeze out as she lifted her face from the mattress she had used to muffle her loud moans. Complying, he did speed up though, for he knew he wouldn't last as he continued to knead her soft breast in his hand while burying his face in her hair. "Yasaka." He called out her name just as he reached his breaking point and with one final thrust came deep inside of her. "In Naruto. I'm coming," Yasaka cried loudly as the feeling of his warm seed shooting into her wound together with his fingers pinching her sensitive nipples was more than she could handle, and her body trembled before it fell limply onto the bed. She panted harshly before a weight came to rest of her back as Naruto collapsed on top of her, his sweat-covered body resting on top of her own, and she felt him place soft kisses along her shoulder as they basked in the afterglow together. After a couple of minutes of staying like that, Naruto rolled off of her and onto his back. The action caused a soft whine to leave Yasaka's slightly parted lips, as doing so caused his member to leave her snug confines before she was silenced as Naruto pressed his lips against hers. After a minute or so, Naruto removed his lips from hers as the two stared at another with gazes filled with love for another. "Again?" he whispered as he was still hard, and those love-filled eyes of her did nothing to lessen that. Yasaka said nothing as she kept gazing at him, though her hand wasn't idle as she reached out and grabbed a hold of his semi-hard length. A small grunt leaving his throat as her hand began pumping up and down his shaft. Then, in one swift movement, she was straddling his waist. It happened so quick and unexpected it took him a few seconds before realizing she had buried him completely inside of her again as she rested on his pelvic area. The feeling of once more being surrounded by her slick and warm walls combined with the sultry look she sent him as she sensually groped her own breast shattered any resistance he might have had as they started all over again and didn't stop well into the night. "Are you okay?" Naruto asked Yasaka as he caught her adjusting her position for the upteenth time this morning. The two of them were currently in her office waiting on their guest. Why yeah, I'm fine. Just a bit sore from last night. You really tired me out, you know?" "Oh, I know." He smirked before reaching out with a hand. "Let me help." Yasaka complied and leaned back as his hand moved to her loins before it was covered in golden chakra reminiscent of flickering flames that quickly soothing the slight burning sensation she was experiencing as it increased her healing factor by quite an amount for a brief period. "Thank you." Yasaka leaned over and kissed him on the cheek as the slight irritation she was experiencing was now gone. "No problem. Though if you had told me earlier I would have done it then." He sent her a dull look that caused her to look away in slight embarrassment. A sudden knock on the door put an early stop to a potential argument as Yasaka called for them to enter. "Naruto-sama, Yasaka-sama." The guard who entered bowed their head in respect at the two. "The representative from Korea, Ari Dono, has arrived and is waiting outside." That got both their attention as they straightened in their seats with Yasaka's tails rising upwards from their previous position close to the ground. Naruto on the other hand had his tails and ears hidden as his current outfit would make them uncomfortable. It was also to show this, Ari, her position and rank amongst the Uchiha hierarchy. "I see. Please allow her inside and have someone prepare 3 cups of tea." The guard gave a nod. "By your leave, Yasaka-sama." He bowed once more before leaving the room. The door didn't stay closed for long as shortly thereafter it was opened by another guard, though instead of stepping inside he merely held it open as a woman whom both assumed to be Ari walked in with a confident stride and a small smile playing on her lips. The first thing both blondes took note of were the 9 long ivory white tails coming out her behind. Something was came as quite a surprise to Naruto as he didn't think there were more 9-tailed foxes bar Yasaka and their daughter. As she walked towards them he and Yasaka stood up though kept their gazes on her, and Naruto saw that like him she too had whiskers on her cheeks, though hers were curving upwards and more pronounced than his own, which had faded a bit ever since he arrived here. Her eyes were amber like Yasaka's own, and pretty much a majority of the Uchiha he had met as they locked onto his form. Raven-colored hair framed her, in his opinion, pretty face, and sticking out on top of her head were a pair of black furred fox ears that would twitch every now and then as she scanned the room before focusing on the other 9-tailed fox in the room. "Ari Dono, I welcome you here inside my office in Kyoto. I take it the trip here was pleasant." Yasaka held her hand out to the gumiho to shake, which she took. "Yes, it was indeed very pleasant, Yasaka Dono." Aries briefly glanced to the blonde young man who was standing beside her as she shook her hand. "And who might this handsome young man be?" They broke their handshake as she moved to stand in front of him and looked him over, licking her lips as she could feel the powerful life force coming from him even without coming in contact. "This is Uzumaki Naruto. He is my mate and the father of our daughter." Yasaka put emphasis on those 2 words as she didn't like the look in the Ravenette's eyes as she eyed him up and down like a piece of meat. She already had to deal with an overly flirty Nekosho and did not want to add her to her problems, as even she had to admit Ari was a beautiful woman, though she was confident in her own beauty enough to not be intimidated by her presence. Ari held her hand out to him with a smile. "Ari, pleased to make your acquaintance, Uzumaki-san." Naruto had to fight to keep a neutral expression as the way she said his last name made a shiver run down his spine before he took her hand and shook it. He caught the widening contact, which was gone as quickly as it came before he felt a small amount of his chakra being taken from him by her, though he didn't think much of it as he just shook her hand before taking it back and sitting down with the others doing the same. "Now that we've all gotten to know each other, how about we get dead?" Yasaka offered, as the quicker they get this over with the quicker she would get her away from Naruto. She wasn't sure what it was, but something about the Ravenette made Yasaka dislike her. The fact that Naruto seemed rather mesmerized by her had nothing to do, of course, nope, nothing at all. Before they could agree with her, the door was opened as a young girl walked in carrying a tray with 3 steaming cups of tea, which she served to them. "Here you go, Yasaka-sama, Naruto-sama, and Ari Dono." Yasaka thanked the girl while Naruto settled for a nod. Ari just sent the young girl a smile, quickly left the room after she was done with her task, garnering a few chuckles. "So, straight to the point you say?" Ari mused as she stirred her tea while looking at her fellow 9-tails, who nodded. "Correct. I don't want to come off as rude, but I assume you can't stay here for long?" "While that would be true normally, I have assigned someone to do my work while I'm here, so I'm not in a rush at all," Ari told her, dismissing her concerns with an easygoing smile that only irritated Yasaka further. "Well then, Ari. In the letter you wrote me you stated that your clan wishes to join Kyoto again, correct?" The raven-haired beauty nodded. "Would you perhaps able to give a better explanation as to why you wish to rejoin us? I've heard some rumors here and there, but I prefer to hear it straight from the source." Ari nodded as she took a sip of her tea, finding no problem with that. "Well, I'm pretty sure there must be truth to some of those rumors, but it's really just that our members are having a hard time finding a mate. This is mainly due to our reputation being less than stellar, which is something we've been working on as well, by the way. The younger ones are being taught to not end up killing any humans when taking some of their life forces. That, and there have been a few rare occurrences where a gumiho would lose control during SX, which would end up draining their chosen partner, mate, of their life forces." Ari frowned at being reminded of that and the shock it gave some of the younger ones that had thought they had finally found their mate. It doesn't help that the humans around the location we occupy are on the low side when it comes to their life force. Unlike here where it is pretty much being released constant, as even now I can sense incredibly potent remnants here in the room that belong to him. Ari breathed in deeply to stop herself from going crazy as she conspicuously tried to absorb what little she could that was in the room from Naruto's earlier action. I see, Yasaka murmured as she watched her control her breathing. That's actually not too far off from what has reached me. Let's say that I would agree. What can you offer in terms of techniques, as that's quite important to know? Well, much like you, Gumiho too are capable of using foxfire. Ari summoned forth blue flames which orbited around her for a couple of seconds before being dismissed. We also have the ability to charm others, which is how we would often use on our prey before stealing their life essences or life force, whichever you prefer. Here she sent Naruto a look that made him swallow uncomfortably as she licked her lips. Lastly, but probably the most notable, is this. Ari held her hand out as an orb spiraled to life, much to the shock of Naruto, who could see the similarity it had with the Rasengan, though hers seemed to be spinning in only one direction, hinting that it didn't have the same destructive capabilities. This is called the Orb of Deception. It's how we steal one's essences either by direct contact or just being near it. She showed it off as she moved it over towards Naruto, after which it sucked out a small sample of his chakra which was golden in color. Ari was unable to suppress her moan as his essences entered her from the orb in her hand. Her earlier observations were correct, as his essences were filled with so much life, just that little amount was more than enough to completely sat her for some time. Hell, she was sure he would be able to feed her entire clan by herself, and she could tell that wasn't even a drop of his total amount. She snapped out of her dreamy state as killing intent was sent at her, courtesy of Yasaka, who was glaring at her. I advise you not to steal my mate's essences without his permission again. Ari quickly nodded, though whether she meant it or not Yasaka was unsure, as she kept her glare on her for a few more seconds before it morphed into a neutral expression. What you have told us is quite interesting, but how do we know you aren't lying? We've adapted to live amongst humans, and while it's clear you've made progress, it isn't quite there yet from what I understand. That's true. Ari uttered as she knew they still had ways to go before they could compare themselves to the yokai here in Kyoto. But we can't learn to adjust without living amongst humans who we need to adjust to. Perhaps. The Gumiho paused and hummed as she glanced at the blonde male that locked eyes with her for a moment before quickly looking away, much to her amusement. He could take me as his mate, she said, making both Naruto and Yasaka choke on their spit. What are you saying? Yasaka almost demanded as she leveled her with another killing intent enhanced glare at what this woman was proposing. To her surprise, Ari actually had the audacity to huff. I don't see what the problem is. He's a powerful male, a yokai as well, and don't deny it, as my senses don't lie. It's only a matter of time before he'll have more women going after him, as you know that most supernatural creatures are attracted to power. It's not even unheard of for men to have more than one partner, at least not those involved in the supernatural, and you know it. Yasaka gave a reluctant nod, as she was indeed aware most devils had a harem, usually in the form of their peerage. Not to mention that after tasting the small sample I've gotten from him, I don't think I can settle for anything less. His essence, his life force, it's simply out of this world. Ari stared at the blonde with hunger in her eyes, which did funny things to Naruto, who felt both scared yet aroused at the same time. If he didn't know any better, he would have assumed she used her charm on him, but ever since arriving here his chakra control had reached new levels he never thought possible with his current reserves that continued to grow by day. How about we take a break for today and continue this tomorrow? Yasaka suggested, as had seen how Naruto was looking at Ari and quelled jealousy at the thought of her stealing him away. I'll have someone show you to a hotel while I'll discuss this over with my mate, as what you're proposing came as quite the shock. Yasaka sent Naruto a smile that filled him with dread, as he knew he should have had better control of himself. Ari could sense the tension between them and nodded with a smirk. I guess waiting a day wouldn't hurt. I'll just send a message to buy replacement, then. Yasaka graced her with a thankful smile as they all stood up. Very well, if you please wait outside, I'll have someone escort you soon while I discuss several matters with Naruto here. She glanced at the nervous-looking blonde, who was currently finding the wall to be very interesting. Giggling softly, Ari turned on her heels as she left the room, an almost unnoticeable sway in her steps as she did so just because. So, Yasaka drawled out once they were left alone and turned to Naruto, who swallowed as he took careful steps backwards while she stepped closer and closer till his back came to rest against the wall. Naruto shut his eyes as Yasaka as he sensed her stopping in front of him. Surprise washed over him, however, when he felt being held in a tight embrace as he slowly peered an eye open to see Yasaka hugging him tightly with her head resting beneath his chin. His fear was replaced with concern as he wondered what was wrong. One hand holding onto her back while his other ran through her long and soft blonde hair. Yasaka-chan? What's wrong? Naruto, the blonde, was somewhat taken back with how soft she sounded, and he looked down to meet her gaze. You still love me, right? Am I not boring to you? He winced at how vulnerable she sounded while also understanding she was afraid. Afraid to be replaced by her or anyone really. Yasaka, he breathed out her name softly as the hand in her hair came around to cup her cheek. Of course I still love you. I doubt I'll ever not love you. I said it before, Haven't I? How you've completed me and made me experience feelings I never realized I missed in life. We even have our daughter, Kuno, who is the proof of our love, so why are you asking something so foolish? It's just, I'm afraid you'll replace me with that woman, she muttered as she buried her face in his neck. Woman? You mean Ari? He felt her nod. I see. While I admit I'm attracted to her as she is very beautiful, just beneath yourself who I still find the most beautiful woman I've laid my eyes on. It's just that though, attraction to her looks, but I assume this is mainly due to what she proposed about being my mate, right? Another nod. Well, it's ultimately up to you as I'm fine with whatever you choose. Just know that you'll never be replaced by anyone, ever. He leaned down and pressed his lips against hers as he poured all the love he had for her into the kiss to where it overwhelmed her. Thank you. Yasaka whispered as they broke off, a small smile adorning her face as her worries were just that mostly gone. Though, that didn't mean that the matter was resolved as she was still going to have a discussion with him as Ari also spoke several truths regarding it not being unusual for supernatural creatures to have more than one lover. Naruto's power was getting closer and closer to her own with each day and it was only a matter of when he would surpass her and even keep growing. Already he could wipe out mountains with that interesting technique of his and that was with only 5 tails. To think what he could do with 9 was frightening. Let's go home. I want to see Kuno and hope Kuroka has behaved herself, Yasaka said with him agreeing as this meeting had been something else. The following day around the same time as yesterday the meeting continued as Ari was once more present in Yasaka's office, looking the same as yesterday even to the smile on her face. So, I take it you've come to a decision? Ari asked as she sat there. One leg crossed over the other and her cheek resting on her hand as her gaze moved between Naruto and Yasaka. You'd be correct with that assumption as Naruto and I have come to an agreement after a long discussion. Yes, that must have been a hard and rough discussion between you two. Ari remarked offhandedly as her eyes trailed over the visible marks Yasaka's neck adored despite the poor attempt to hide them much to her embarrassment as her cheeks colored red. But go on, do tell what you've agreed upon. Very well. Naruto and I have agreed upon welcoming all of you to Kyoto where they'll be given a district to themselves, the size depending on how many of you there are. A pleased smile graced Ari's lips at that. And what about my other proposal? Here Yasaka's lips thinned into a line. Yes, that proposal. I will allow Naruto to take you as his mate. I thought about it and much to my displeasure have come to agree with your words yesterday. We live for a long time and I guess it wouldn't hurt. Know this though, I am and will be the alpha between us two. The two of us already have a daughter and not to mention that he has proposed to me last night. She smirked at the surprised look of the Gumiho. Oh, so I'll take it that helped with your decision, then? You could say that, though, when will all of you migrate to Kyoto as we'll have to get everything prepared? Humming, Ari answered. I'm thinking 6 months from now just to have everything in order when we'll arrive here. There's still some unfinished business I'll have to take care of back in Korea and while not too important I still rather finish up. That's understandable. We'll have to keep in contact however as I need certain information regarding your clan and their members. Yasaka glanced at the clock on the wall and took note of how late it currently was. If that's everything I take it we are done here. Ari nodded before they stood up, Naruto as well before shaking hands once more and he could sense her steal a bit of his power again but just let her. Let us walk you out. Yasaka offered which Ari graciously accepted. They had barely taken 5 steps outside when they were stopped by a guard who called for them. Naruto-sama. Yasaka-sama. We've caught a man spying on the women's side of the hot springs and he requested to speak to the leader. While normally we would ignore him we have confirmed he can use chakra as well. Yasaka narrowed her eyes in distaste at the thought of some perverted man spying on a bunch of unaware women that were here to relax. Next to her Naruto's eyes had briefly widened as an image of a spiky white-haired pervert of a man came to mind and he asked for a description. This man, can you tell us what he looked like? The guard gave him a nod. Hi Naruto-sama. He looks to be in his 50s and has long spiky white hair. Most noticeable however are the 2 red lines running down his eyes. Just like that his suspicions were confirmed as to who this man might be and he turned to his now fiancée. Yasaka-chan. I'll go and check this out while you can see Ari off. I might or might not know who this person is. Alright Naruto-kun. Yasaka moved to kiss him. I'll be joining you once I'm done here then. He nodded and wished Ari goodbye and a good trip before he walked with the guard towards where they had the man held. He's in there and his chakra is locked away. Another guard spoke to him as Naruto glanced at the man he knew as Jiraiya from behind the tinted window. He had changed from the last time he had seen the man. He definitely looked older as he had a few noticeable wrinkles on his forehead. His current outfit hadn't really changed though it fit well within Kyoto and he could see a couple of wrinkles on his forehead. Leave us and wait till Yasaka appears. He told those who were present before he unlocked the door and entered. From his position in the chair Jiraiya looked as the sound of the door being unlocked and then opened caught his attention. When he did however his eyes widened as he came across a face he never thought he'd see again. In Naruto, is that really you? he questioned as he looked at the now older blonde, and even with his chakra being somehow sealed could still feel the power coming off of him. It is indeed me, Jiraiya. He could see he surprised the older man with the use of his name. A part of me tells me I should be surprised why you are here but another part of me isn't. He sat down across from the man who had been inspecting him intently. What are you doing here? I asked to speak to the leader of this place. A perverse chuckle escaped him as his mind was still on what he had been told of this Yasaka person, and he really wanted to see her for himself. Naruto on the other hand was less amused as he wasn't going to let him ogle Yasaka in his presence. Not now, not ever. And so, with a decent dose of killing intent, he got Jiraiya to stop, who was taken back by the look in his eyes. If you're thinking about what I think you are, then you better put a stop to that really quick. Why? Do you know her? Perhaps you could hook me. Uphe fought down his surprise at how different his godson acted compared to the one he had last seen before his disappearance. Oh, I know her very well. After all, she is the mother of my child and my soon-to-be wife. Here, Jiraiya's eyes threatened to escape their sockets. Both of his godsons claimed that this Yasaka, a woman of unparalleled beauty and leader of Kyoto, was going to marry him and that he already had a child. It was only his long life and years of experience that he managed to not fall unconscious from the shock, though he certainly took some time to recollect himself. It also made him more curious to see if the rumors of her beauty were unwarranted or not before he could pat his godson on the back for a job well done. You know, we aren't the only one from our world here. He saw Jiraiya perk up at that and continued. Aside from us two, Tsunade and Kakashi are here. So are the others from my age. Even Sasuke is here, though he went on a journey some time ago. Lastly, the Kage and his siblings are here as well, all doing their own thing. Their conversation came to a halt when the door leading to the room they were in opened and Yasaka walked in. Naruto smiled softly at her as she made her way over to him and shared a quick kiss before realizing that who he was doing this in front of. Jiraiya meanwhile had gone completely silent, frozen as he laid his eyes on the most beautiful woman he had ever seen. None of the women in the elemental nations could compare, as it was like he was staring at an angel from heaven itself. Her breast, from what was visible he could tell, were even larger than Tsunade's own. It was a feat he didn't think was possible. The rumors of her beauty didn't do her true, and his godson had managed to land here of all people? Already he had surpassed his father just by virtue of his choice of woman. Do you know him, Naruto-kun? Her voice, sounding like chiming bells, reached Jiraiya's ears as she sat down on his lap. I'm afraid I do, Yasaka-chan. He's from the world I'm from but seemed to have arrived here some other time. Perhaps has something to do with what we were told, but I'm not sure. Either way, let's introduce you to each other. Yasaka, this is Jiraiya. Jiraiya, this is my fiancé, Yasaka. Yasaka sent him a smile, though didn't shake his hand, as this man was apparently a pervert, and who knows where those hands have been, much to the latter's disappointment. So, Jiraiya suddenly said, his earlier disappointment completely gone. You mind letting me out since you know me? No, it was Yasaka who answered, and he then looked at his godson pleadingly, who shook his head. Sorry, but her word is law. If she wants you to stay here you will, and not even I'm going to fight her on that. He then stood up with Yasaka in his arms, who didn't mind. We're heading home to check up on our daughter. I'll see if I can visit later and might get you out, he explained at the Toad Sage's questioning look. Grumbling a bit, Jiraiya complied, as it was better than nothing, he supposed. Sending him a nod, Naruto and Yasaka left the room as Jiraiya sighed before he closed his eyes. Might as well get some sleep in while he's in here for who knows how long. Is it true? Naruto glanced to his side to where Sairoorg was sitting while facing him. You're getting married? Naruto blinked as he listened to his friend's question. News travels quick, he muttered. But yes, I proposed to Yasaka a couple days ago and she accepted without wasting a second. Seriously though, how did you find out, as we haven't made it public knowledge yet? Ahaha. Well, there have been some rumors circulating in the underworld, or rather the supernatural world in general, but it wasn't until I overheard some people while making my way through here it was confirmed. Naruto let out an annoyed groan. Really? Yeah, Sairoorg nodded before something else popped up in his mind. Anyway, what's the cause for the sudden change? I remember you saying you and Yasaka would wait until Kuno would be a couple years older. Huh? Oh, that. Just certain things have happened not too long ago. It made me realize that I shouldn't wait for something important as this. Though, I'd be lying if Yasaka's expression upon me asking her to marry me wasn't worth it. And that's not even talking about what she did later that night. A pleasant shiver ran down his spine. Just thinking about it, how she'd tired me out. He stopped himself and shook his head to clear his mind. But yes, that's pretty much what happened. Sairoorg hummed but said nothing. As for the wedding itself, it'll be held in a month or 3. Unfortunately, by then I wouldn't be surprised if everyone connected to the supernatural would be aware, which is why we are going to hold our wedding in private. Or at least only open to close friends and the like. Oh, by the way, is it true the author of AbyssEater is currently here in Kyoto? His question caused Naruto to turn and look at him with a raised eyebrow. You know of AbyssEater? Yes. I mean, no, not personally, but the books are quite popular in the underworld. They came out of nowhere and now it's hard to come across a devil who hasn't read at least one in the series. I see, well it's true as he's here. He had been caught trying to peek on the woman's side of the hot springs. I'm just glad I don't need that crap. I mean, why read about some fake people having sex when you can have the actual thing? Again, I doubt the author of those books ever had any sort of experience with an actual woman. He stifled a chuckle that threatened to escape with his subtle jab towards Jiraiya. Naruto-kun nya. The blonde only had a few seconds before two slender arms wrapped around him from behind as a weight settled on his back. Kuroka, Naruto greeted the nekosho on his back as he felt her ample mounds pressed against him even through the clothing he wore. What brings you here? He asked as his eyes rolled up as if he could see her. Nothing particular nya. Just overheard you saying you're marrying Yasaka-sama nya? Even without facing her he could visualize the way her head was tilted as she asked that question. He also took note of the slight tightening of her arms around him but didn't think too much of it. I did. I assume Yasaka told you as well? Or at least you picked up on that given that the two of you live with us. Also, what did she say about the suffixes after her name? Not to. Kuroka said softly. She shook her head. Anyway, she slithered around him and without a care in the world dropped right onto his lap, leaning against his chest and missing the look of surprise that flashed across his face. Her tails came up from behind and lightly caressed his face before he attempted to swat them away as it was rather ticklish though his attempt was nimbly dodged. She then surprised him as she moved and in less than a second had her face inches away from his, a soft smile playing on her lips as she merely gazed at him. You know, Kuroka began softly. The tone of her voice was somewhat worrying Naruto who glanced to the side where his friend was sitting and watching this with amusement dancing in his eyes. I've never properly thanked you for what you've done for me nya. For my little sister as well. There's no need Kuroka. He said quickly before this situation would escalate but she stopped him as she brought a finger up to his lips. But I want to, she protested childishly with a whine and a pout. It was cute at the same time it was arousing. It wasn't his fault though, Kuroka was beautiful. He would rank her beneath Ari who was ranked beneath Yasaka and having her like this, on his lap and gazing towards him with that look. He was glad he wore baggy pants today or else she would have noticed something. By the way, who was that woman I saw a couple days ago nya? The raven-haired one with the whiskers. She smelled like a fox. Much like you and Yasaka do nya. Oh, you've seen her? Naruto raised an eyebrow as he asked her that. I thought you just missed her. Regardless, she's a fox yokai who leads a small clan in South Korea, the Gumiho. She was here to talk having the clan rejoin us here in Kyoto in which several agreements had been made. Is that why you're pushing forward the marriage between you and Yasaka? I saw her and she's really pretty. I assume something must have happened during the meeting you had that was the cause for the sudden change. Everyone here in Kyoto knows about you and Yasaka and that you two are made for each other nya, even without being married. So I guess she wanted something, or rather someone. Kuroka pointed her finger towards him with a look that showed how confident she was of her theory. As she finished with her theory, Naruto surprised her with a soft chuckle. Well, you aren't wrong. She indeed wanted someone, me, and offered herself to be my mate. Of course this had Yasaka rather worried. Don't tell her that you heard that from me though. The two of us had a long discussion after the first meeting where words were exchanged before I proposed to her and she of course accepted it immediately. Like you said however the meeting with Ari, that's the Gumiho's name, had to do with it as I doubt I would have asked her to marry otherwise. It is like you said that Yasaka and I clearly love another and there hadn't really be a need to show that we were committed to another. One could argue that Kuno, our daughter was enough proof but oh well. I don't want her to be insecure about us, our relationship and to have any fears that may pose a problem in the future. However, I can tell you that I was actually quite surprised when Yasaka agreed with Ari and let me take her as a mate since she hadn't given a clear answer the evening before. It was only my increased control of my emotions that caused me not to show it, so that's pretty much it. She and her clan will be coming here in between 5 and 6 months which is enough to prepare. Ari herself will be moving in with us which means I should talk to Yasaka about a bigger home as the current one is getting rather cramped. Perhaps one near the areas more populated by other yokai like the one that is being prepared for the newcomers in a couple months. Kuroka hummed as she listened to his story, her hand coming up to scratch her cheek while occasionally glancing to Sairoorg next to him. Why's he here anyway? Dunno. Naruto shrugged as two turned towards the bio. I'm here to see if the rumors were true really. Not to mention that I enjoy being away from the underworld and by proxy my immediate family. Ah. Naruto nodded sympathetically as he had been informed of his situation with between himself and his father along with younger sibling. He wondered though, was it worse? Having no parents at all or having your own father despise your entire existence and see you as a failure, to the point of removing you and your mother from his family and straight up ignoring you if not outright hating? It was a morbid thought and one he'd rather not mull over for too long. Anyway, it's been good catching up but I have to go now. I promised Yasaka-chan I'd be taking care of Kuno for the rest of the dock her grumpy by being late. He looked expectantly towards Kuroka, still on his lap and completely ignoring him in favor for staying where she was. Narrowing his eyes, he grabbed one of her tails between his fingers and channeled a tiny amount of lightning chakra to the tips. Nya. Kuroka quickly jumped off his lap and held her tail as she sent him a glare. "That's your own fault, Kuroka," he smirked as he got up. He bumped fist with Cyroorg and scratched Kuroka between the ears as he got up. "I'll see you around. Also, Kuroka, don't forget Sharon will be out of school soon." Ah, her head perked up. "Thanks Nya. I'll pick her up then." "You do that. I'll talk to you next time, Cyroorg. And I'll see you in Sharon later," he said to both Devil and Nekosho before he parted ways while whistling a soft tune. Pushing a baby stroller, Naruto seemed somewhat out of it as he made his way through the streets. It wasn't until Yasaka gave him a light nudge that he left the dazed state with a small shake of his head. "Huh? Oh, sorry Yasaka-chan." He apologized with a small smile as he looked at her walking next to him. She was wearing a white summer dress that left her shoulders bare and showed a rather large amount of her cleavage. Yet, there weren't really any stairs sent her way as they walked, with the occasional exception, but that was mostly from someone who wasn't aware who she was. He himself too had changed into something more comfortable and more fitting with the weather outside, as it was quite warm in his previous outfit. They stopped when they reached the corner, as it was where he and Yasaka had to part ways for now. She had business at a different district with the Inagami, who had asked if she could pay them a visit. "Now, behave and take care of Kuno while I'm attending my own business, will you? I'll either come looking for you once I'm done or we'll be heading home, depending on how late I will be finished." Naruto nodded, though while a slight grumble, as he didn't like how she was treating him like some child. Though the kiss she rewarded him with afterwards was definitely worth it, however. Both let out a small moan as they begrudgingly had to break it off, though her whisper of "tonight" made him already look forward to it. Giving her another peck on the lips, he watched as Yasaka with a light blush said and waved goodbye to Kuno before she turned and walked off. He kept his eyes on her form as she walked through the crowd until she was completely obscured, after which he released a sigh. "Well, guess it's just you and me, Kuno." He looked at his daughter, who was awake and staring right back at him, her hand making grabbing motions while smiling. With a soft chuckle, he too continued on before stopping as he came across a cafe. Peering inside, it looked rather lovely and he had to waste time somehow, so with that in mind he decided to enter as the door easily opened with the slightest nudge from the stroller he was pushing. The sound of chattering reached his ears as he entered, though he ignored it in favor of searching out a spot he could sit at. "Oi, Naruto." That didn't last long. Grumbling under his breath, he turned to the source of the voice only to fight back the violent twitching of his eye as he spotted almost everyone from Konoha there. Were they having some kind of meeting he wasn't aware of? And here of all places? "Really, Naruto? We have an empty seat here for you." Kiba's boisterous voice rang through the establishment. Quickly glancing around, he cursed softly as he couldn't find any other seats that were free, and so he begrudgingly began making his way over to them. They made place for him on one of the edges, which was nice, as else he wouldn't be able to keep in proper eye on Kuno. "Hey." He greeted them without much enthusiasm as he made himself as comfortable as he could, pulling the stroller as close as he was capable of with his position. He noticed that she was still awake and decided to lift her from the stroller into his arms and held her close. The rest of those at the table watched while he did so, the girls sporting light blushes as they could see how well he was handling her. Not to mention that his daughter was really cute. "Hey Naruto," Ino addressed him, which made him glance briefly at her as a sign for her to speak. "Where's Yasaka-san?" she questioned as she didn't see the beautiful blonde anywhere in the vicinity. The others turned to him as they too were curious. She had her own job to do and is in a meeting. She asked if I could look over Kuno while she would be busy. Depending on how late she's done, she might drop by if I'm still here, that is. He answered as his attention went back to Kuno, whose amber eyes were looking at everyone that was sitting at the table with curiosity. "Is it true? He mused towards Kiba, who was leaning over the table towards him. "I overheard Jiraiya speak with Tsunade, and he said you are getting married?" Several gasps were heard from the Konoha nin and he inwardly groaned. Guess it couldn't be kept a secret for much longer, huh?" He gave a light shake of his head. "Regardless, it's true. I proposed to her a few days ago and she accepted. No, there hasn't been a date set yet. Why I didn't tell anyone? I did, but you can see how that turned out, though it may explain why word has even reached the underworld if that perverted toad is blabbering without a care in the world. I'll have a talk with him when I'm done here about secrets and keeping his mouth shut." He took note of the expression on Hinata's face, which also reminded him he still had to talk to her and he would make sure he would do so before the wedding would take place. That reminds me. Don't go bothering Yasaka either. If I hear from her that one of you. He looked at the girls. "Ignore my words, you aren't invited. Simple as that. We already decided the wedding will be invite only, likely private as well, so trust me on this." Dada. He looked down at Kuno, who was grasping onto his clothes with her small hands, his previous expression of seriousness melting into a soft smile. They looked surprised at hearing her talk, though from his lack of surprise this clearly wasn't the first time, but seeing Naruto affectionately cuddle the little girl would make anyone's heart warm. Despite knowing that he had changed, it was still hard for them to see the blonde like this. The image of the hyperactive, Loudmouth blonde was still in their minds, and it was an actual challenge to replace it with the Naruto they were currently looking at. Even the fact that he had gotten completely over Sakura and was now getting married was just so insane, a part of them weren't able to accept it as the truth. However, they all knew Naruto cared little about that or them. Yes, they were aware he didn't enjoy spending time with all of them more than necessary, as he didn't count them as actual friends. In hindsight, he had a point, as it was like he said, they only knew about his first and last name and that was it. They were sure that if it weren't for Yasaka asking him to spend some time, as little as it is with them, they wouldn't hear of him at all. Another question. Who is the black-haired babe that's living with you? I saw her leave your home with a little white-haired girl a few times this week. That took longer than I thought. He mused as they finally found out before answering. Her name is Kuroka and the white-haired girl is her sister. The two of them are living with Yasaka and I. There was a short pause before one by one each of the boys gave a nod. Hey, he chuckled. He couldn't really blame them, as she was quite eye-catching with exotic features and a body women would kill for. It only proved they had good taste in women, and they likely would have done the same with Yasaka if it weren't for the two being together. I'd say good luck with that. She doesn't seem to interest in the opposite sex. Aside from me, that is. So you wouldn't mind if we try? He waved a hand. Go ahead. I'm just side chance you'll end up disappointed, but it's your own choice. A part of him wouldn't mind seeing it happen in person. Kuroka rejected each of them. Kiba especially, since he had a connection to dogs, and Kuroka was quite literally the opposite. He was actually somewhat surprised he hadn't hit up with any members of the Inagami clan that resided in Kyoto. On paper they seemed to be an almost perfect match. Da! Kuno made a noise as she opened and closed her mouth repeatedly. Understanding what she wanted, he reached beneath the stroller and retrieved a bottle of milk, which he warmed up for a moment before beginning to feed her. She chugged down the milk as the others watched, silently taking notes for when they would be parents of their own, as Naruto seemed to be rather knowledgeable with parenting, seeing how he was handling his daughter. Though they assumed Yasaka played a large part in this, as the blonde woman looked both kind and patient enough to teach him the ropes. Once Kuno emptied the bottle, he put it back where he got it from as he gently rubbed her back until she let out a soft burp that made the girls at the table squeal in such a manner it hurt his ears. He wasn't the only one, as Kuno was startled by the noise and began to cry. Immediately Naruto leveled them with a glare as he held Kuno close and began to rock from side to side, softly rubbing her back and humming a certain tune that often got her to calm down. Sorry, they mouthed towards him, and he rolled his eyes as he continued to calm his crying daughter. It took little over a handful of minutes, but eventually Kuno's crying subsided and in place came exhaustion as her breathing softened and she kept herself close to the warmth her father provided. Naruto smiled warmly down at her and slightly adjusted his own position to be more comfortable for both. Wow, Ino muttered as she watched the two. Next to her, Sakura nodded as she too was impressed with how well he handled the situation and how quick he got her to stop crying. I know, right? And he did it so quick as well. Sakura agreed, equally amazed by his quick response. Naruto meanwhile breathed out softly as he turned his head to look at the clock that hung on the wall. His eye twitched as he took note of just how little time had passed. He nodded every now and then to appear that he was listening. Please be done soon, Yasaka-chan, he pleaded inwardly as his hand continued to rub his daughter on her back. A sigh escaped her lips as the blonde vixen leaned back in her seat. She had been listening for quite some time as the older man in front of her went on and on about, in her opinion, rather mundane topics. Really? Was this why she had been requested here? To listen to an old man ramble on without taking in how she was currently feeling? Though, there was another reason Yasaka didn't look forward to any meetings with this man. The reason was because he was the grandfather of a certain curly-haired blonde that was fixated with her. He was one of the men that pushed for the two to get together shortly after she had taken up her role as leader. As according to his words, she would be more respected if she were in a committed relationship as opposed to single, where one might take advantage of her. His words had been insulting and she had been tempted to put him in his place but couldn't, as at the time people were still uncertain about her leadership. If it weren't enough, he had reminded her in almost every meeting they would have, that his grandson was still single and waiting for her. Yasaka scoffed at the thought of a man other than Naruto touching her. If you aren't planning to discuss important matters, I request you to hurry up, as I have a daughter and mate that are waiting for me, she interrupted his rambling. A scowl found itself present at the elder Inagami's face, both at her interruption of him, which he found rude, and being reminded that she had been sullied by some outsider of all people. Their leader and strongest Kyuubi, recorded having a child with some dirty half-blood. The only positive was that it wasn't some human male, or worse, a devil. Yes, your mate. The elder tried his best to hide his disgust, as Yasaka did not condone or allow one to exclude one based on their status of full or half-blooded yokai. And especially not when her mate's a half-blood of all people. Yet, his attempt didn't succeed, as the blonde vixen straightened in her seat and leveled him with a glare that would have made lesser men cower. I hope for your own health you stop talking, as you know how I feel about those old practices when it comes to the purity of one's blood, right? A sickly sweet smile accompanied her words, along with a pressure that bared down his form. Due to being past his prime, the elder Inagami found it hard to breathe and thanked the heavens as he got a weak nod off. Enough to make the weight disappear like it wasn't there in the first place. He swallowed as a couple drops of sweat ran down the side of his face as he was being reminded once more why she was appointed as their leader and how foolish it would be to challenge her. She was an alpha female in the world of yokai and hadn't weakened in the slightest, even with now being a mother. He inwardly cursed once more, as she would be the perfect wife for his grandson and their child would have become a symbol of power for the Inagami as a whole and would elevate their status. But alas, his foolish grandchild did nothing but embarrass him and their clan those years ago after challenging her to become his wife. His arrogance blinding him as Yasaka humiliated him in front of members of all the other clans residing in Kyoto. And even then it seemed his grandson had developed some sort of obsession with the woman. He let it go, however, as long as he won't do anything that'll tarnish their or rather his reputation even more. Seeing how he seemed done, Yasaka stood up and excused herself as she left, withholding a curse as these past hours had been nothing but a waste. She had hoped he had wanted to discuss matters that were actually important, not complain and expect her to listen as if she were some sort of therapist. Outside, Yasaka closed her eyes and concentrated as she searched out for Naruto's energy. It didn't take her long, for his chakra was both large and warm yet had a slight evil undertone to it. Opening her eyes, she glanced in the direction he was in, which was not home but close to the shopping district. So with that in mind, Yasaka started walking. She found the building she sensed Naruto was in. Entering, her eyes darted from left to right while she made her way deeper inside before landing on the unique shade of blonde she loved. Only to promptly have her eye twitch once noticing how he was slouched in his seat, his head turned to the side and his eyes closed. She also noticed Kuno, who appeared to be sleeping in his arms as the rest of the people he was sitting at the table with were chattering loudly. Yasaka shook her head. While they looked cute like that, she didn't like how he wasn't watching their daughter even if she was asleep and there were others present. Marching over to them, it didn't take long for her to be noticed, as it was kind of hard to miss her really. They greeted her with nods as they had an idea what she was planning. "Naruto-kun," she leaned down and whispered in his ear. She got a groan out of him, followed by a light shake of his head as he continued to doze off. Kuno on the other hand had woken up and stared at her mother, recognizing her as she tried to reach out. Smiling at her daughter, Yasaka bopped her on the nose and giggled softly as she watched Kuno scrunch up her face. Wanting to hold her, Yasaka attempted to free her from the grip Naruto had on her, though this was proven to be almost a mistake, for as soon as her fingers grazed his hands, his eyes snapped open. An unbearable amount of killing intent was being released by the blonde as his eyes, red with slits for pupils, met her own. Yasaka wasn't sure, but at that moment her heart asked from how malicious it felt, and a glance around showed that she wasn't the only one, though she did handle it much better. It took a few seconds for Naruto to realize who it was that stood in front of him and that it was her that had touched his arm. His red eyes melted into blue as his killing intent washed away and he looked apologetic towards his love. "Sorry, I forgot where I was and thought someone tried to take Kuno," he mumbled out as he lessened his hold on his daughter, who strangely hadn't been affected in the slightest. Yasaka gained a look of understanding upon hearing that. "It's understandable," she replied softly with a smile before glancing around. "Though this might be a problem." Naruto too looked around and noticed that everyone bar the three of them had passed out, unable to handle the full brunt of his intent to kill. Oops. With his head held down, Naruto opened the door for Yasaka, allowing her to enter as she was pushing the stroller Kuno occupied. He entered after her and closed the door behind him, following her as she parked the stroller in the hallway and lifted Kuno into her arms, and she marched towards the living room where she sat down. "Sit down, Naruto-kun," she spoke gently while patting the empty spot next to her. Wordlessly he complied. "Why are you so quiet? I already told you it's fine." She turned and looked at him. "I know, but," he began as he frowned. "I felt like I wasn't myself at that moment. The urge to kill at that time was almost overwhelming." He clenched his fist. "I think it has more to do with the fact that I'm still changing. A sixth tail, which is much harder than the previous ones, I can only assume. It makes me worry for 7 and up if this is what I'm currently dealing with." "That is actually worrying," Yasaka commented. "Though I have faith that you'll be able to control it. I expect nothing less from my soon-to-be husband." A smile of his own formed as she said that, and he leaned in to peck her on the lips. "Yes, I will conquer this obstacle just for you. I never let something block my path and go around it. No, I will either remove it or go right through it," he exclaimed passionately with a hand raised towards the ceiling. A sudden weight joined him and he looked to see Yasaka resting her head on his shoulder, to which he responded by resting his own head onto hers. "I love you, Yasaka-chan, and I can't wait until I can call you my wife." "Likewise, husband." Happy. That was the emotion Yasaka experienced ever since Naruto had proposed to her. It was one of the happiest moments in her life, only beaten by the birth of Kuno and the first time he told her he loved her. Thinking about it, she realized that ever since he had come into her life she just felt happier all around. He was the missing key she had been looking for. The piece that completed the puzzle that was her. Looking around, she pointed at several locations that needed to be fixed up for the wedding, her wedding, that would be happening soon in front of the shrine that she was named after. It was going to be beautiful. She could already tell with how colorful Kyoto was this time of the year, as it was currently fall. Red, yellow, orange and green. Those were the colors of the leaves that belonged to each of the trees that were located throughout Kyoto. They stood out with how vibrant they all were, each giving her city a bewitching look that attracted many visitors. No, a bit more to the right or else guests won't have a good view, while also making sure they won't end up bumping into another. Yes, right there is perfect. Yasaka chirped as she looked down at the paper she was holding. She had with Naruto's help made a list of how they wanted things. Along with that was a sketch of the general positioning that she wanted everything to be. It was quite vague, but she could make out the basics, though she pretty much needed to see it happen with her own two eyes, as a sketch could only do so much. Ah! Yasaka let out a yelp as she spotted something out of place. This is just wrong. The colors don't match with the rest. I should have it replaced. She scribbled it down and made sure to pass the information on later. Yuwa! Naruto groaned as he stretched his limbs. He released a blissful sigh while doing so as he left the tailor he had just visited. He didn't enjoy standing for so long in one place, which he just had to do as he got himself measured in order for them to create a tailored modski which he would be wearing for his wedding. Moving for days on end without a break. No problem. But once he would have to stay in a single spot for an hour is where troubles began. It was just that he had a certain amount of energy he needed to get rid of at all times. And usually he'd get rid of any excess energy in a pleasurable manner at night with Yasaka. Speaking of which, his vixen was most likely still busy near her shrine. She did tell she personally wanted to look things over, which he was fine with. She had taken the day off and Kuno was at home where he had a clone looking out for her. Might as well check up on his daughter, as he was sure Yasaka wasn't needing him at the moment. Unlocking the door to his home, he made his way inside, only to frown as he sensed someone else other than his clone and Kuno was present as well. Walking a bit closer to where he could sense the visitor was at, he stopped, groaned and rubbed the bridge of his nose. The guest that was inside was Tsunade, who he could hear talking to his clone. How troublesome that his own clone couldn't even follow his order, which was to look after Kuno, and just that. Instead, it was doing all kinds of shit he didn't approve of. It made him wonder what other activities his clones would do, as while he regained their memories, he usually just discarded those if it wasn't for something important. Concealing his presence, he watched from the doorway as the two continued to converse, his eyes seeking out his daughter, who he spotted laying on a warm blanket that was placed on the couch. However, it seems she had noticed him as well, as when his eyes landed on her he saw her staring right back. He swore he saw her eyes lit up and reach out to him. "Papa." Kuno drawled out and she wiggled in her place before she rolled over onto her stomach. It was only when she began to crawl towards him, the real him, that his eyebrows moved and he acted. Not giving a single warning, the clone talking with Tsunade popped, making the woman jump slightly, having not expected that, as the real Naruto walked over to Kuno and lifted her in his arms. "A clone," he heard her mutter in slight shock while gazing at the now empty spot his clone previously occupied. "Correct, a clone that didn't listen to my orders." He held Kuno close to his chest with an arm while looking down at her. "Mind telling me what you're doing here?" "I'm here to talk. Jiraiya told me you're getting married soon." "Now, Yasaka and I have been planning this for quite some time now. In fact, I just got back from the tailor in order to have a custom-fitted outfit for the wedding, which will be soon." He sat down as Kuno snuggled contently in his hole. "So why wait till now?" "Well, I'd be lying if I wasn't aware before, but I was unsure if you'd be welcoming me, or anyone for that matter, as you seem to dislike us." "Not dislike, it's more so that I'm treating you as strangers, which you might as well be." "See, there you go again with that. Why are you being like this?" "Why?" Naruto repeated with a raised eyebrow, and he had to make sure not to raise his voice with how sensitive Kuno's ears were this close to him. "I'll tell you why. Let's start with yourself. I was kicked out of the orphanage when I was barely able to walk and forced to live on the streets. I had to search through the trash for any food, as shops didn't wish to sell me any. I lived a life of solitude because no one wanted anything to do with me. They either ignored me or would curse my existence, and I'm not even sure which is worse at this point. It wasn't until I was 16 that the first person told me they loved me, and that came from Yasaka. All of this, I suffered through while thinking I was alone, when I actually had living relatives who rather gamble and drink away their consciousness than actually take care of me. You know how emotionally stunted I was? Just being hugged and kissed on my cheek caused me to freeze up, as I associated pain with any sort of touch. No one ever asked me how I was feeling. They saw the smile I wore and never thought that something was out of place. Once more, it was Yasaka who saw there was something wrong with me. And back then I had only known her for a couple weeks and we weren't even together. Can you believe that? A woman I barely knew for weeks knew more about me than people I've spent years in company with. That's not all, however. Apparently I also had a godfather who showed up 12 years late and apparently wanted nothing to do with me, judging from how dismissive he was during our first meeting. In fact, if it weren't for how perverted the man was, our meeting, which was a coincidence, might have not even happened in the first place. Then there's Kakashi, who was supposed to guide me as a sensei should, but that didn't happen either. In the months that I had been under his care, the only thing he taught me was how to walk up trees using chakra. Months only for that. And when it came to it during the Chunin exams, he threw me aside and assigned me some second-rate trainer without telling me first. Honestly, how can I not hold any dislike for any of you? Even my patience has its limits, and it's quite an accomplishment by itself that you've managed to reach it, for my fuse must have been a mile long. He paused as he felt Kunu's small hands grab his clothes and rub her face against his chest. It was as if she could sense how agitated he was, and he responded by ruffling her hand and rubbing up and down her back softly. A soft rumbling noise could be heard from her throat, and he chuckled softly upon hearing it from her as he kissed the top of her head. Cute. Tsunade looked on at how different he acted when handling his daughter. She would have to be blind to not see the affection he held for her. The same affection that was available for one other person aside from the little girl. That made her wonder about something else. What about Hinata? What about her? Are you going to do anything with her? She loves you, YG her, Naruto scoffed. I know, she had let everyone know when she came here, with Yasaka, who had just given birth not a day earlier, to Kuno in the room as well. She seems not to care about anything except for me. It's not love but an obsession, and I'd say that she's quite unhinged with how she seems to think we're meant to be, or that I belong to her somehow. I'm not sure how she got those ideas in her head, as I've spoken maybe a sentence or two in total. The look she sends Yasaka and Kunu's way when she thinks no one is looking are another reason I think she's not quite stable in her head. If not for the fact that I know there's no way, even with 100 years of training, that she'd be an actual threat to Yasaka, I might be more worried. Meanwhile, as long as Kuno is in my presence, she wouldn't even dare to try anything, as her whole self-worth is based on my opinion of her, it seems. Though, I admit I actually wanted to talk to her about her obsession and that she should focus her affection on some other unfortunate soul, but I kept pushing it further and further away, and I haven't seen her these past few days, neither have some guards that walk around so mad. He shrugged uncaringly. I have more important matters to deal with in the upcoming days. If that's all, I'm planning on seeing Yasaka, so I'd like for you to leave. He created another clone that would show her out, as it was around the time for him to feed Kuno. As Tsunade followed his clone to the door, he himself got up as well and made his way to the kitchen. He placed his daughter in the high chair, who after wiggling for a few seconds stopped and turned to watch him. Smiling softly, he bent down till he was face level with her and lightly bopped her on the nose, the corner of his lips twitching upwards as she scrunched up her face cutely and raising her own hands to touch her nose. Wait here, Kuno-chan, and I'll get you something nice to eat. He straightened himself before placing a cutting board down on the counter. His gaze moving towards the nearby basket that was filled with fresh fruit Yasaka had gotten earlier today. He grabbed an apple, mandarin and a few berries before cleaning them with some water and then preparing them. His hands were a blur as he removed the skin of the apple and the mandarin before cutting the former up in small pieces to make it easier for her to digest. Once done, he placed them all on a small plate, which he then proceeded to place in front of Kuno. The little girl stared at the fruit for a moment before meeting his gaze, looking at him as if asking if he was serious. Frowning, he sat down in a chair next to her before picking up a small piece of apple and positioning it in front of her, but Kuno kept her mouth closed. Coming up with an idea, he moved the piece of apple away from her, Kuno's eyes following it as he opened his own mouth and ate it himself. He made some over-exaggerated noises while smiling and saw Kuno sparing the pieces of fruit another glance. Grabbing another piece, he once more brought it over to Kuno and stopping right at her closed lips. She glanced at it a couple more times, switching between the piece of fruit and him before slowly her lips parted and allowing him to feed her. She munched on it, and Naruto picked up a berry which he held out for her while also grabbing one for himself. They continued on like that, Naruto feeding his daughter and himself until eventually all of the fruit was gone, and he got up again to wash his hands and clean Kuno's face before lifting her out of her seat. Come Kuno, let's look for mama. He laid her down in the stroller and made sure she was secure and comfortable, after which he pecked her on her forehead before heading out. In a different location altogether, several thousands of miles away from Kyoto, or Japan in general, a blonde man could be seen making his way home after having been called to attend a rather important meeting. His unruly spiky blonde hair swayed as a gust of wind passed by. He waved and smiled a bit uncomfortably as he was greeted by a bunch of blushing women on his trek, making sure not to rest his eyes on them for too long or else he would face the wrath of his wife. He shivered upon that, as he had experienced it once, and that was more than enough to even cower him. Making his way to his home, a modest-looking two-story house that fit in well with its surroundings, he unlocked the door and entered. Minato-kun, is that you? He heard the voice of his wife, the woman he loved, reach out to him. He locked the door before he made his way where the sound originated from. There, in the kitchen with her back to him, she stood. His gaze was focused on her red hair he had fallen in love with all those years ago. Hey Kushina-chan, I'm back. As those words left his mouth, the woman spun around, showing the apron she wore as her hands were covered in flour. And what was the meeting about? Well, Minato scratched the back of his head. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to tell you, but I'm sure Lord Metatron wouldn't mind if it's you, not to mention that it involves the rest of us. Oh, Kushina raised an eyebrow and crossed her arms as her interest was piqued. Yeah, you might have heard of it, but the current ruler of Kyoto, who's also the leader of the yokai there, Yasaka is her name, is getting married soon. Yasaka, Kushina repeated the name softly. Isn't she that nine-tailed fox yokai? I remember hearing about her some months back when news spread that she's a mother now. She had only heard bits and pieces here and there, though much more when news had spread of her pregnancy and when she had given birth to a healthy baby girl. Aside from that, Kushina had also heard that the woman was considered as one of the most beautiful women alive and that more than a few men had their dreams of snatching her up ruined when the news broke out. Yes, that one. Minato nodded his head. Now the church wants to send some people to get some information on them. Mainly about the man she's marrying, as they haven't had any luck with the Shinto gods protecting Kyoto. The meeting I just had was to inform me that our family has been picked due to us being the best for the job, mainly because our background. He didn't miss the slight pain that flashed through his wife's eyes. So in a few days you, Menma, and I will be traveling to Japan and staying there until the wedding is done. Oh, okay. I'll inform Menma when he returns from his training at the church today. I'm sure he'll be delighted to travel as he's been wanting to do so for a while. Kushina smiled as she thought about her son, her second child. It was shortly after they had arrived and settled here in Italy with help from the church that she had found out she was once again pregnant. The joy she felt when she found out was second to when she was pregnant with her firstborn. Though it had also come with a heavy dose of guilt. They were off somewhere else while their firstborn, Naruto, who they had not even been with for an hour, was off all by himself. It was only due to Minato's help, reminding her that no, they weren't replacing Naruto. He or she, whichever gender the baby would end up with, was its own person. And they stayed positive in hoping that Naruto had a good childhood without them. That their firstborn would be treated like the hero he is for keeping the beast at bay. Alright Kushina-chan, I'm going to check up on Dulio as he requested to speak with me as well. Walking over and giving his wife a kiss on her cheek, he vanishes with a flash of yellow light. Oof. Naruto groaned playfully as Kuno did her best to hit his chest with her small arms. He even fell on his back and she took the opportunity to crawl on his chest, all while laughing joyfully. Naruto-kun, dear. Yasaka spoke up from next to him, though she too wore a smile at their interactions. Alright Yasaka. He got back up, which made Kuno pout, whereas Yasaka gave him a light kiss on the lips before she stood up and walked over to the table where multiple CBUSY writing invites for their wedding. She looked over each of their shoulders, making sure his handwriting was both nice and readable. Do we need to send Amaterasu an invite as well, or is it a given that she'll be present? One of them asked her. It wouldn't hurt to send an invite to be sure. But like you said, I'm sure she'll be there regardless. The sound of their door opening and closing was heard by both Naruto and Yasaka as their ears twitched. We're home. They heard Kuroka's greeting as she entered the room with Chiron in tow. The little girl greeted the two of them before she made her way to her room. What's with her? Naruto asked Kuroka as the Nekosho plopped herself down next to him. He averted his gaze as he caught an eyeful of one of her large breasts, which was out in the open due to how Kuroka had thrown herself on the couch. She herself didn't seem to have noticed, but Yasaka had, as well as she responded by hitting Kuroka on the back of her head with one of her tails. What was that for NYA? She turned to Yasaka, who just pointed at her chest. Looking down, Kuroka noticed what the problem was and pushed her breast back in her kimono, not before sparing Naruto a glance, who was focused on Kuno and did his best not to look her way. Could have just told me nya. She whined while rubbing the back of her head. Those tails of her held deceptive amounts of strength as they looked so fluffy. HMPH, maybe if you stop tempting my soon-to-be husband with those udders of yours, came Yasaka's witty reply. Udders? Kuroka cried out as she jumped off the couch and came face to face with the vixen and glared. She was very proud of her breast, which accentuated her figure even further, and from the glances sent her way wherever she walked, she wasn't the only one that agreed. What do you call these then, nya? Kuroka boldly reached out and grabbed a hold of Yasaka's chest, and she couldn't prevent the gasp from escaping. They're even bigger than mine. Well. I need them for Kuno-a, and Naruto-kun likes to play with them in bed. Her smile returned as she said the latter, and she stood tall with her tails high up. Kuroka narrowed her eyes in response but stopped herself from hissing as this kitsune woman was clearly baiting her. So, deciding to be smart, she huffed before turning around and marching off to see what her little sister was doing. That was close. Naruto spoke up and Yasaka turned towards him as her tails slowly lowered. MPH, I had to remind her that I'm the alpha in this household. You? What about me? Naruto, Yasaka began, and her tails started to rise once more. I understand. He gulped as he hid behind Kuno, who giggled as she looked at her parents interacting with another. Mama scary. Papa. Kuno said as she clapped her hands together and her own tails, small as they were, repeatedly thumped against the couch. Yes, Mama is really scary. Naruto whispered with a nod as he held Kuno close to him while glancing towards Yasaka every couple of seconds. We're done, boss. The clones called out, breaking whatever tension was left from before. They turned and looked to see several piles of cards next to each of them with the clones that had written them overexerting how tired they were. Good. He placed Kuno safely on the couch and got up. He popped the clones one by one with a second interval as he and Yasaka made their way over and looked through them. Huh, they did a better job than I initially thought they would. Looking over at Yasaka, he saw that she was satisfied with them. I'll have some clones henge and deliver them, though you'll have to hand Amaterasu her invite as I doubt I'll be able to reach her. No problem, I'll take care of it. Cool, if you don't mind, I'm going to take Kuno out for a walk. The city is truly beautiful this time of the year and I want to see more of the less populated areas. It's fine, don't be out for too long, okay? Sure, Yasaka-chan. He leaned over to her as they shared an intimate kiss before reluctantly breaking it. As he made his way back towards Kuno, he made sure to trail his fingers over one of her tails, knowing fully well how sensitive they were to his touch. Which was evident as Yasaka bit her lower lip, missing the smirk playing on Naruto's face. As they left, Yasaka was alone in her home and she neatly placed the cards Naruto's clones had written in separate piles while humming a soft tune. She took a step back when she was done and nodded as she found herself satisfied with her work. It was then that she heard someone knocking on the front door, and after briefly glancing around she decided to look who it was. Her feet tapped against the ground as she made her way over to the front door, her mind somewhere else even as she opened the door. And because of this, she missed the pair of pale eyes that glared up at her with unbridled amount of hatred for her. Hatred that had been accumulated due to the knowledge that she had stolen him from her. That his lips would kiss someone that wasn't her. That he had a child with someone that wasn't her. And worst of all was that he loved someone that was not her. She couldn't hold herself back any longer as she lashed out with a palm strike aimed at Yasaka's heart in hope of ending this before it even started. Her attempt was expectantly thwarted, though the exact way Hell left her with shock. As there, wrapped around her wrist mere inches away from her target, was a golden furred, bushy tail. What? Hinata exclaimed as she managed to free her wrist and jump back, staring at the 9 extra appendages that came from behind the woman. Demon. Wrong, Yukai. Yasaka corrected, sending a fierce glare at the girl that had dared to attack her as her tail swished back and forth behind her. Why are you attacking me, girl? You should know I'm far above your power. She tried to reason with her even after her attempt on her life. She tapped her feet on the ground as a barrier popped up in the general vicinity to keep out noises and potential damage that might happen. Because you stole him from me. With that, Hinata launched herself towards the kitsune woman with the intention of killing her. Once she was close enough, Hinata aimed 2 jabs at her, only to frown as the woman's tails came up and blocked her. It didn't stop her though as she continued with her jabs, her arms moving faster and faster as she continued, and another of her tails joined in. Hake Rokuhuyan Sho. Her attack was a failure as each jab of her hands were expertly blocked. It didn't help that she had no tenketsu, making her form of combat severely weakened, and those tails were quite fast. As if to add insult to injury, Yasaka closed the distance between them with enough speed she barely even caught it before she was in front of her and sent her sprawling as one of the tails she used to defend herself smacked her right in the face. Gah! Hinata felt her vision blur as her head made contact with the ground as her tail had sent her several feet back and tumbling across the ground. Shaking her head to clear her vision, she slowly got back to her feet, hiding her shock at how much a simple tail swipe had taken out of her. She took a couple calming breaths while Yasaka merely stood there, waiting as if she wasn't some threat and it did nothing but piss her off. Getting into a stance, she expelled chakra near her hands before using her control to shape it to her liking. A single of her cut short eyebrows rose as Yasaka observed what the girl standing away from her was doing, watching as her chakra became visible before it was shaped into a head of some sort of animal. While it was nice to look at and whatnot, Yasaka still felt no danger even as she foolishly charged towards her once more. So, to counter her, Yasaka took a deep breath before breathing out a stream of blue-colored flames, halting her in her steps. While it looks nice, it doesn't improve your combat capabilities whatsoever. The smug smile irritated Hinata further, especially as she realized how outclassed she actually was. As a Hyuga, she didn't use any elemental jutsu as they weren't thought that. The fact that the people in this world didn't use any sort of tenketsu put her also at a massive disadvantage against anyone that can use some sort of ranged attacks. Her tails also had no internal organs she could damage and they could block her attacks with ease. There being 9 of them granted her the ability to easily overwhelm her. Then there was also the fact that this woman was a yukai. And not just any yukai but a kitsune with 9 tails, which are known to be the strongest with some exceptions of course. Had she known all of this, she would have waited until she had more information on her weaknesses before acting. Yasaka on the other hand had enough of her pitiful attempt to attack her. Wasting no time, she was next to Hinata and planted her fist in her stomach, making sure to hold back quite a bit lest she ends up killing her. Removing her fist from the girl's stomach, she twirled on her feet and once more let her tails smack her to the ground to the point she could hear her bones break and her muffled cry reached her ears. Now, Yasaka used one of her feet to roll her on her back. As you've seen, you stand no chance against me, even with me holding back this much. There are 2 options right now. The first is that I have you imprisoned for attacking me, and I can assure you that when Naruto-kun hears that you tried to kill me, the mother of his child, he will be less than pleased. And that was an understatement if anything. The second one is that you leave Kyoto and don't return, ever, and I won't inform him of what just happened here. Your choice is I'm fine with either one. Pale eyes stared up at the clouds in the sky for some moments before her lips parted. I will leave. Good. Yasaka flashed her a pleased smile. You'll have until 6 p.m. and then I want you gone, and I will have people watching you to make sure you keep your word. With that, the vixen turned around and made her way back inside. As soon as she closed the door behind her, the barrier she had put up earlier dissipated. Entering the living room, she spotted Kuroka sitting there, who jumped up and walked over to her. Everything alright, Yasaka NYA? I sensed your energy spike along with someone else NYA. Yasaka smiled calmly. I'm okay, Kuroka. Just had to settle something with someone. I see you're no longer upset either. She then walked past the Nekosho and sat down. I am NYA. I might have overreacted earlier, so sorry NYA. She gave a sheepish smile as she played with one of her tails. It's fine, I was merely playing around with you. Oh, that reminds me, where's Naruto, NYA? He's currently out with Kuno. He wanted to get some fresh air. He shouldn't be gone for too long. Okay, also I heard there will be renovations here NYA, is that true? A nod. Correct. Soon we'll have someone else joining here, as she, together with her clan, are moving to Kyoto. It's why I had a new district built close by. Another person, and a woman you say? I'm not looking forward to it either, but it's what we have agreed upon. Kuroka hummed a bit as she positioned herself, so she was now positioned sideways on the couch with her kimono riding up her legs. What sort of agreement is that? Oh, you'll see when it happens. Yasaka then got up. If you excuse me, I have to contact Amaterasu-sama regarding certain matters. She bid the Nekosho farewell before she left the room. Tap, tap, tap. The sound of water dripping into a larger body reached Naruto's ears, making them twitch as he slowly opened his eyes. Haven't been here for quite some time. He muttered upon seeing the dimly lit walls that belonged to the seal that housed the biju. Slowly he stood up, his ankles staying submerged in the murky water as he began walking towards sole source of light at the end of the hallway. Hey, the blonde called out as he neared the enormous cage that held the fox at bay. Naruto. A large red eyes opened and stared down at him. I haven't seen you in quite some time, Naruto. He scratched the back of his head. I haven't really had any time, you know, been busy the past few months with raising Kuno and several meetings I had to attend. Not to mention that I'm getting married today. A smile stretched across his face at the thought as he began imagining how Yasaka looked like, as he hadn't seen her since early this morning. A loud clang echoed throughout the area, snapping him out of his thoughts to see it was the fox's doing, who had tapped one of his fingers against one of the many bars separating the two of them. Why did you do that? He whined, much to the large fox's annoyance. Seeing you like that, it's simply insightly. Naruto rolled his eyes at his words. Meh, not my fault, I'm excited. Anyway, what did you bring me here for, as outside people are busy doing my hair? He looked at the fox with a single eyebrow raised. I'm curious as to know why you stopped your training. Or at least don't train as much as you used to. After all, it has been 2 years yet you still haven't yet a 6th tail. Naruto frowned at the reminder as 5 golden tails waved slowly behind him. Not my fault. It's really hard to gain another one. Not to mention that I feel my personality change, becoming more hateful, if that makes sense. And if that's only at the 6th tail, then I can't even imagine what happens at the 9th. Yes, I noticed that too. You're not only absorbing my chakra, but the hatred that comes with it as well. Your hatred, huh? Is there a way for me to lessen the effects, unless you don't wish to tell me? The large fox stared at him for some time, seemingly mulling things over. There is. Naruto perked up at that. Though I am unsure if it's as possible here. I don't care. Please tell me if there's a way. Determination shining in his eyes as he stared back at the fox. In order to not be affected by my hatred, you need to overcome the hatred you already harbor. Only then you will be able to fully make use of your chakra without side effects. You could try asking that vixen of yours, or that sun goddess. I see. I'll ask her sometime in the upcoming days. Seems they're done in the outside world. It was a nice conversation we just had. Thanks, and later, I think. He gave a lazy wave as his form slowly disappeared from inside of the seal. Outside, Naruto's eyes that had a glazed over look to them slowly regained their focus. He blinked a few times to wet his eyes before staring back at himself in the mirror in front of him. A soft hum left his lips as he looked himself over, nodding as he liked what they had done with his hair. It was a bit shorter, but it was fitting. Likewise, it was still wild and spiky, but more in a controlled way. And judging from the blushes the women that had done his hair each sported, he was sure Yasaka too would love it. He got up from the chair he was sitting on and turned to the women who had done his hair with a smile. Thanks girls, I like it. Now, if you excuse me, I have to put on my clothing for today. The women nodded as their blush had deepened when Naruto had turned around, showing his well-muscled physique as he was clad in only some shorts. They gave him a light bow before bidding goodbye and leaving him by himself. He sighed, stretching his arms to loosen up some of his muscles before he walked over to where his custom-fitted outfit was present. It looked nice, even without him wearing it. It had a couple of differences when compared to a traditional one, but it were small changes he liked. An example were the small orange spirals that circled the sleeves. It added a bit of personality to it. He wondered, as he began putting on the pieces of attire, how Yasaka was currently doing. He absent-mindedly created a clone to help him and to make sure everything was in place. She had taken Kuroko with her, presumably to help her with putting on her clothes as well, for he doubted Kuroko was some sort of stylist. Well, he spun around before looking at his clone, who raised his thumb. Looks good. It fits very well. Good, it should be. He nodded to himself before dismissing the clone. He glanced at the clock before clicking his tongue. What to do till it starts? He shrugged. Might as well look around and see who's all present. He had spotted Cyroorg with Kusha around earlier but didn't get a chance to greet him other than a brief wave, as he had to be on time to get his hair done. Then again, he couldn't show himself until it was time. Nya. Stop, Yasaka Nya. Kuroko let out a whine as she grabbed Yasaka's hands with her own, prevented her from trying to mess with her kimono for the umpteenth time in such a short period. Sorry. Yasaka mumbled out an apology as she hung her head. Her ears on top of her head flattened against her skull and her arms dropped beside her once Kuroko had let go. It's fine, Nya. Kuroko quickly said as she didn't like where this was going. Honestly, with her sudden mood swing, she'd assumed she was pregnant again. I just don't want you to ruin your beautiful kimono after we finally got it done, Nya. I know you're excited. It's understandable since you've probably looked forward to this day since you were young. I know I am. She mumbled out the last part before shaking her head and focusing on the vixen standing in front of her. But, if you keep doing this up, something might end up out of place and there might not be enough time to fix it, Nya. I don't think you want to stand Naruto up on one of the most important days of both of your lives, no? Yasaka gazed at the Nekosho for a minute after she was done, making her fidget a bit before she smiled at her. You're right. I'm overreacting, but I can't help but feel nervous. I've been imagining what it would be like since I was young, to fall in love and one day being married to the same person, and today it's actually happening. Yasaka turned to her left and stared at her reflection visible in the full-length mirror before her. Her long blonde hair that was held into a ponytail cascading all the way down her back by a traditional hair ornament with 6 golden bura kanzashi and several red kanzashi. She wore a white kimono different from a traditional one, as hers had small golden clouds scattered around it and other silver symbols on it. Aside from that, it had red accents visible and making the kimono itself stand out more as it hugged her voluptuous body quite nicely. Her blonde bangs framed her face and making her amber eyes stand out more than they normally did. She wore no makeup, for it simply had no use for her, as her beauty was simply on a different league in comparison to any human woman, and a large percentage of the supernatural too. Yasaka was very much aware of the large amount of men lusting after her even after the knowledge spread she was no longer single and had a daughter. There were even some minor gods from other pantheons that had expressed interest in her, though kept their distance with knowledge that Amaterasu made sure no harm came to either herself or Naruto lest they wished to risk war with the Shinto faction. Especially Amaterasu herself, whose domain over the sun is much larger than both Apollo and Ra's combined and more than capable of going toe-to-toe against other gods herself. I just need to let go of my worries, at least for now. In a few hours I will be married to a wonderful man, the love of my life and the father of Kuno Aisha. She stepped away from the mirror and glanced at Kuroko. Come, we need to get some last preparations done, and I can't show myself until the wedding starts. What are we here for again? A boy, looking to be around 17, asked as he looked to his right where the older red-haired woman was walking. Peering out beneath the boy's straight red hair was a single light violet eye that made contact with the woman's own, who proceeded to smile at him. We're here on a vacation while also gathering some information about the church, Menma-kun. We've said that a couple times now. Or were you ignoring us when we explained so? Menma shivered upon seeing the sweet smile she wore, along with the fact that both her eyes were closed yet still locked onto him. No, I was just very excited about coming here that I forgot. Good one. Menma turned around as his father leaned in a bit and whispered to him, along with holding a thumb up. But Minato cleared his throat as his wife was back to her usual self. We're here to gain intel regarding Yasaka Dono and whomever her husband might be, as their wedding is today according to rumors that had reached the Vatican. It's why we arrived here a few days earlier, to make it look like we are just a normal family on vacation. Okay, but aren't we attracting attention now? Menma gestured to the glances sent their way as they walked. It's nothing, Menma-kun. I guess people aren't used to seeing people with our hair color around here. It's nothing out of the ordinary. Despite Kushina saying this, she exchanged a glance with her husband as the three turned the corner. Both she and Minato could sense who was a yukai and who a regular human, as they could somewhat sense their chakra levels even with it being rather well suppressed. Oof. 2 grunts were heard as Menma collided against someone, sending both of them towards the ground. Neither of them actually made contact, however, as Minato quickly caught his son and the person colliding with him was being held up by his friend, at least they assumed. "Lee, what did I tell you about not looking where you were going?" The person asking the question was a young man estimated to be a year and a bit older than their own son. He had long brown hair that went down his back but was held in a neat ponytail. He was, much like the young man he helped stand back on his feet, wearing a black wedding suit. He made Minato and Kushina wonder if they were guests of the wedding that was being held later. "Sorry Neji-kun, in my excitement I didn't pay attention." Lee bowed his head to his friend who just shook his head. Though what mainly gained the pair's attention wasn't his clothing but it were his eyes. They were pale and held no pupil, much like a blind person, but it was clear this young man was not one of them. No, they recognized the eyes he had as the famed Byakugan of the Hyuga clan of Konoha. The question that rang in both their minds was, how? How did this young man have those eyes? Focusing their sensing abilities on the two revealed that both had Jonin-level reserves, which could mean only one thing, as they weren't yokais, that's for sure. They were from Konoha as well, or at least the Hyuga is, as there's no chance Hiyashi would let a member of his clan roam free like this. Somehow they too ended up here, in this world as well. And while both parents would like nothing more to pull them aside and ask them all sorts of questions, they couldn't, as they had a task at hand. Whatever. Just apologize to him so we can go. Naruto won't be pleased if we're late and the others will wonder where we are as well. Lee nodded as he turned to Menma and bowed while saying he was sorry. Menma just nodded as those eyebrows on his forehead made him uneasy before the pair were off. In their haste, neither paid much attention to the blonde and redhead behind Menma. Both who had frozen up when the Hyuga mentioned Naruto. Could it be? Kushina looked at her husband with hope shining in her eyes. The possibility that their first son was somewhere in Kyoto as well. And from what it sounded like, he was going to be present as well at the upcoming wedding. All the more reason to try and sneak in so they could at least confirm if it's him or just someone with the same name. Minato sent his wife a nod as he was thinking the same. They were going to have to sneak in and see it for themselves, if only to make themselves feel more at ease at the knowledge they gain. Let's continue. According to what I've been told, the wedding will be held near the Yasaka shrine, which is still some distance away from where we currently are. If we keep up our pace, we'd be there in an hour, depending on how busy the streets are. With the wedding be held today, a large part of the Yasaka shrine and its surroundings was closed off for public visits today. Only those with an invite were allowed entry, and a majority of the guests were already present. The sun was shining and the sky was a beautiful blue color, cleared of any clouds, courtesy of Susanoo, who did so upon Amaterasu's request. After all, Amaterasu wanted this day to be perfect for both Yasaka and Naruto, and having it rain would ruin that. Both Susanoo and herself were present as well, for Yasaka had asked her to take care of Kuno as she wouldn't have much time to do so herself, and neither would Naruto. She had accepted, of course, as the little girl was as cute as button. Yokai from different clans were present as well today in order to witness the marriage of their leader in person. They mingled and spoke to other yokai, which were easy to find seeing as they all had their yokai traits visible for all to see. It was mainly a surprise for those from the elemental nations, as they hadn't quite seen them like this, Tsunade being the exception, as she was aware of Yasaka being a yokai herself. A nine-tailed fox, to be precise. It was also why she wasn't as surprised as the others were upon seeing them like that. Of course they wanted to see their own being married, and especially when it was a person as important as Yasaka was. They all supported her union with Naruto, the only exception being a couple yokai from the older generation who were of opinion that a pure blood, and especially one of Yasaka's lineage, had disgraced them by copulating with some like him. Not that they would say so to her face, but the whispers were there. "Man, I didn't think there were so many of them," Kiba commented as he adjusted his suit slightly. He stood together with the others from Konoha and Suna, who nodded in agreement as they took in the sight. "But damn, what are they feeding the women here to all look like this?" He gestured to the large amount of female yokai that were present, each having bodies that was unmatched back in Konoha or even the humans here. His comment earned him a slap on the back of his from Sakura. "Ow!" He rubbed the back of his head before turning towards her and growled. "What was that for, Sakura? You can't just say something like that. Have some respect, Kiba." "TCH fine," he muttered before he realized something as he looked around. "Say, have any of you seen Hinata? Not to mention that I'm not seeing Neji and Lee either. Now that you mention it, I haven't seen her in a while at all. Though I'm not sure if she will be here in the first place since, you know?" Nods of understanding were given by those around her. Everyone in Konoha knew of Hinata's feelings for the blonde. Everyone aside from Naruto, that is. Feelings that seemed to only get stronger when Naruto was sent to this world. And finally, when they were reunited and she confessed her love, he straight up rejected her before revealing that he was with someone else. And if that wasn't enough, the fact that he had a child with her was the final nail in the coffin. Hinata couldn't compete against Yasaka and come out on top, and it didn't require a genius to see that. Naruto was totally enamored with his fellow blonde, and she was likewise with him. "What about Neji and Lee?" Tenten asked, as she had since this morning before she went shopping for a nice dress with the rest of the girls. Ino let out a short chuckle. Knowing Lee, Neji probably has his hands full with him, so I say just give them some time. Something then caught her attention as she looked past Kiba to see a certain young, raven-haired woman walking behind him clothed in a fitting black kimono. She was holding hands with a much younger white-haired girl who too was clad in a fitting kimono. Hey, aren't those two living with Naruto? Kuroka I think is her name and that other girl is her sister? They turned around and Ino was correct as they watched the raven-haired young woman walk around. That is until Ino opened her mouth and called the two over. Ino, what are you doing? What does it look like? I'm inviting them over of course. The manner of which she spoke made it sound as if they were idiots. Those two are obviously much closer to both of Naruto and Yasaka than we are, so perhaps we can get some info from them. As Kuroka and the younger girl neared them, they noticed something about the two they had somehow missed when they had first seen her. Sticking out between their hair on top of their head, one pair white and the other pair black, were ears reminiscent of a cat, coupled with the thin tails, their respective colors swishing behind each of them. Hey Kiba, I think we know why she rejected you, Ino joked, which earned her a few chuckles as the boy in question ignored her to kept his eyes on her animal features. That was most certainly unexpected, and he could tell he wasn't the only one. Kankuro, who also had expressed interest in Kuroka, was as surprised as he was, though he wondered why Kiba didn't smell the clear scent of a cat when they had first met. Hello Nya. Kuroka greeted them with her verbal tick that made a shiver run down the spines of the men near her. Sharon stayed glued to her older sister as she hadn't met these people before and still wasn't that comfortable near strangers. Hello. Kuroka was it? The young woman nodded. I wasn't aware you were Yukai as well. Neither were the others either, to be fair. Sakura glanced at her ears and tail. Really? You'll be in for a surprise when the ceremony happens then Nya. Her comment garnered several raised eyebrows as they didn't quite understood what she implied, aside from Tsunade, who had an inkling of an idea. Likewise, Shikamaru's mind already went to work and he narrowed his eyes as he tried to decipher what she was saying. He had some ideas but nothing concrete aside from speculation at this point. While they talked, Neji and Lee arrived, greeting the rest while also glad they were on time and explaining why they were late in the first place. It was a couple minutes later when the soft tune of flutes sounded throughout the area. The music got louder over time and slowly brought a halt to the chattering guests, who started to look around as they assumed it was going to start. Huh? What's going on? Menma asked as the red-haired boy had started to look around much like the other guests the minute the soft sounds of the flutes reached his ears. Shish. Kushina hushed her son before pointing towards the southern tower gate more and more guests started to focus on. The trio needed to attract as little attention as possible as they had sneaked inside, using their shinobi skills to walk up surfaces while suppressing their chakra to the maximum. It was an easy task for the former Kage and Jonin, though their son had a bit more trouble as his control wasn't quite on the level as them. Luckily no one was paying them much attention as they had all been too busy holding conversations amongst themselves. There were no signs of their first son, Naruto, either. Woe they had hoped would be present. They looked but didn't see the shade of blonde that shouldn't be hard to find if he was here, making them assume it must be coincidence and that it was someone else that shared his name. Once some sort of unseen signal, all of the guests moved towards the side so that the middle area, the one that where the shrine stood, was now empty. The flutes hadn't stopped playing and Minato took the opportunity to get a quick look at the guest. His eyes slid from left to right before coming to an abrupt halt and subsequently widened as he recognized someone. It wasn't just someone. No, it was Jiraiya, his sensei, who he saw amongst the crowd and wearing a fitting suit. And it wasn't just his sensei who Minato saw. Tsunade was there as well, along with several others around them. They noticed the Hyuga was present too, and so was the young man that had bumped into Menma. Yet, after looking around them, Naruto was nowhere in sight, which saddened him, though he was going to make sure to speak with Jiraiya. He hadn't seen the man in over 18 years and he was sure his sensei would be happy to see him as well. Minato wanted to wave at his sensei, call out to him and grab the man in a hug, but didn't get the chances. For one, he would look weird amongst all these people. Two, it would put attention on him and his family, which is the last thing he wanted. Lastly, the flute started playing a different tune and gasps were released by the guest around him. Setting his gaze towards the south tower gate, he watched as two women in Miko outfits, Yukai from the pair of fox ears and single tail each, had walked through the gate. Both were very beautiful and the soft smiles they both held were more than enough to enchant the single men that looked at them. Then, walking through the gate after them were the bride and groom, who stole the attention of the two women in front of them, and rightly so. While most guests were captivated by them, Minato, Kushina, along with a majority of shinobi from Konoha and Suna, had eyes so wide a small tap to the back of their heads would make their eyes roll out of their sockets. Though both were for different reasons. Clad in his fitting Motsuki kimono, Naruto was escorted by a single-tailed fox Yukai, who was one of the many shrine maidens in Kyoto. She was leading him towards the location he was going to meet up and see his soon-to-be wife Yasaka for the second time today. To make things more mysterious, or is it surprising? Well, either way, they had his eyes covered by a piece of cloth so he would first see her when it was time. Thankfully, due to his heightened senses, he didn't have much trouble walking blindfolded as his ears focused on the sound of his guide. There was a slight issue at first with him having trouble discerning his guide from her fellow shrine maidens that were walking behind them, but with a slight amount of chakra channeled to his ears that was quickly taken care of. From what he could tell, he had walked for a minute or two, in which he had taken a few turns before coming to a stop due to his guide doing the same. He felt one of the women walk up behind him, her hands taking a hold of the blindfold covering his eyes before slowly sliding it off him and stepping away from him. He kept his eyes closed till he sensed only one person standing in front of him, after which he slowly opened them. His breath hitched the second he laid his eyes on Yasaka's form as she took his hands in her own soft ones. "You look," his mouth opened and closed a couple times as he tried to find a word to describe her right now. He wanted to call her beautiful, but that would be an understatement if not an insult. So he didn't finish, but Yasaka knew what he wanted to say, so she wasn't hurt by his lack of words. He let his eyes trail over every inch of her form, from top to bottom and right back up, before locking eyes with those amber orbs of her he had come to love. Yasaka stared right back at him with affection, the genuine smile on her face amplifying her inhuman beauty several times. He had to withhold the urge to lean in and kiss her right then and there, saving it for when they were married. The surrounding shrine maidens watched the two with smiles of their own, as they could almost feel the love those two radiated for each other. Jealous thoughts into their minds were squashed as quick as they came. While Naruto was a fine specimen and a prime candidate for a mate to any woman, they knew better than attempt anything. "You're going like that, Yasaka?" He eyed her tails and ears that were being showed. "Not that I mind." "Yes, I don't want to hide them now," he nodded at her. "Alright. They lead and we follow after." He glanced down at their intertwined hands and gave hers a soft squeeze. A pair of shrine maidens stopped in front of them. Both stood next to each other and Yasaka and Naruto copied their stance. Likewise, the other shrine maidens did the same but positioned themselves behind the soon-to-be-married couple. The sound of flutes playing reached their ears. Yasaka's along with her fellow fox Yukai felt their ears twitch. "Let us go." The blonde woman spoke to the two women in front of them, who nodded at her words and began walking with the bride and groom after them. Following after the two women in front, the second they walked past the gate and came into view, Yasaka and Naruto could feel the attention was solely on the two of them, a bit more on Yasaka than him, as it was hard not to look at her. The two kept their attention focused forward towards the transformed shrine, where a Shinto priest stood with a shrine maiden to his side. It had been decorated with a red carpet for today, and the two shrine maidens leading them split up and each walked towards the sidelines where they joined the rest of the guests. Likewise, those behind the pair did so as well, leaving the couple by themselves as they walked towards the shrine Yasaka was named after. Her tail swayed gently behind her as she made sure not to have them swish around too much, as they usually reflected on her mood, which in this case was joy. A couple of her tails brushed against Naruto's arm, which was holding the hand that had his fingers intertwined with her own, as the two walked up a few stairs before stopping in front of the priest and shrine maiden, who both wore small smiles, as it was a huge honor to be the one marrying these two. As the priest started by purifying the shrine, and Naruto took a quick glance around as he spotted those of Konoha and Suna grouped together, with surprisingly Kuroka and her little sister standing with them as well. He could easily tell they were surprised at Yasaka's appearance, the ears and tails especially, while also being mesmerized with how she currently looked. The exception to this were Tsunade and Jiraiya, for either were already aware she was a Yukai. It didn't stop that perverted man from giggling in a perverse manner, which Tsunade corrected by nudging him in the ribs. He focused his attention back towards the priest upon feeling Yasaka rub her circles on his hand with her thumb just as the priest finished what he assumed was the first phase. The second phase came in the form of 3 small cups that were being held on a platter the Miko was holding. Having read up on the process, he accepted the smallest of the 3 cups, after which he took a sip before handing the cup over to Yasaka, who copied his action. She placed the cup down after swallowing its content, which was sake, before placing the small cup back and taking the second smallest cup. This time it was her who took the first sip before letting Naruto take it from her hand, downing the remaining liquid. 1 cup remained, and it was the largest one there. He took it with both of his hands and swallowed down half of the sake before, much like the first time, gave Yasaka the cup, who downed the rest. Once they were finished and she placed the cup back on the platter, the priest led them over the altar that had been put up behind him. The priest stopped, and so did the couple as he took the rings Naruto had picked out. They faced each other, holding hands as both smiled affectionately. Her tail swayed back and forth much more fervor as the priest began with the final part, which was calling upon the gods to bless their marriage in good faith. And may Musubi no Kami watch over these two and allow their marriage to prosper in both moments of weakness and strength. For it would be nothing less than a sin to see a couple as in love as the two in front of me come to an end. No? A couple chuckles were heard before the priest held out the rings to take. Naruto was first as he let Yasaka's hands go in favor of taking the ring before she held up her left hand, which he gently took. She parted her fingers and he slid the ring down her ring finger. She marveled at it, her eyes following the ring as it was slid down her finger. It was a beautiful golden ring reminiscent of a fox, with it not being a traditional one. It was longer than a normal ring, with one end becoming thicker as it was the tail of a fox with colorful jewels adorning it. The other side was shaped to appear like the head of a fox. Its eyes being formed by 2 rubies while the rest of its head was almost filled with small diamonds. Deciding she could look at it later and for much longer, it was her turn as she picked up the remaining ring. It was the same shape as hers, though less gemstones were present. It still had the rubies for eyes and a single diamond on its head, but that's where it stopped. Naruto held his hand out to her and she took his in her own before singling out his ring finger much like he had done with her own. The smile never left her face as she slid the ring on his finger. If anything, it only seemed to widen as Yasaka realized that it was official now. She was married woman now, and Naruto, the man she loved with all her heart, was her husband. She glanced towards the priest standing to the side, Naruto doing the same. He seemed to understand what was asked and gave them a nod. Seeing that, Naruto cupped her cheeks, staring tenderly down at her, which was a look she returned. Yasaka, he whispered out her name before leaning his head down as he was a couple centimeters taller than her. Naruto. Yasaka returned his breathy whisper as she watched him lean down. Their lips met in a passionate kiss and Yasaka stood on the tips of her toes as she put all her love for him in their lip lock. Naruto had his eyes closed as he focused on the kiss and nothing else. One hand he used to cup her cheek moved down to her hips as he held her a little bit closer. Unsure how long they stayed connected like this, but it had to come to an end as the need to breathe made itself known. Both their eyes slowly fluttered open as they broke their kiss. They kept their gazes locked and their face close to the other. Both were panting lightly before Naruto leaned in with another quick kiss. "I love you, Yasaka," he whispered to her upon moving his head back and watched as her amber eyes glistened before a tear ran down her cheek. Seeing her emotional like this, he pulled her close in a loving embrace, one hand rubbing up and down her back while the other was softly rubbing her tails as he could hear her sniffle against his chest. He turned to the priest that married them and thanked him, with the priest giving them a bow in return. Naruto wanted to meet up with some of the guests, Saruorg and his queen, who were present, along with Amaterasu, who they had taken care of Kuno, but waited for his wife who was still in his arms. Yasaka pulled her face away from his chest and he saw her tears were gone. Sure, her eyes were still a bit puffy, but she was smiling that beautiful smile of hers again. "You okay?" Yasaka nodded and he kissed one of her ears. "Let's greet the guest then." The pair walked out of the shrine with their hands intertwined, where they were quickly greeted by the group of Konoha and Suna, while Kuroka and Shiron stayed back for the moment. "Why are you stopping me, Minato?" Kushina demanded an answer from her husband, who held her back with a single arm. She had been waiting for this ever since she had first laid her eyes on him the moment he was revealed to be the groom. Her baby, her first son, was right there. She could see the back of his spiky blonde hair from where she stood, along with wanted to go over there and pull him in a hug while giving him a kiss for every year of his life she had missed. She thanked the church for sending them here, as she could at least be present in one of her son's most important days. Speaking of which, her motherly instincts reared their head as she wanted to go over there, pull Yasaka over to the side and start interrogating her and make sure she was perfect for her son. Sure, they both seemed to love each other back then when the ceremony took place, but that could be just an act. She wanted to see her love for her son herself, as a mother knows best for their child, or something like that. Kushina, Minato sighed as he tried to calm his wife down. "I know you want to head over there. Trust me, you're not the only one, but we can't just go without a plan. We can't just waltz over there and introduce ourselves as his parents out of the blue. I'm pretty sure he'd think we're crazy." "Wait," Menma butt in and making his parents look towards him. "You're telling me that he pointed in the direction Naruto was in, "is my brother and is married to that babe who we are here for in the first place?" While it was rather rude in the way he worded it, Menma wasn't going to beat around the bush as he found her, Yasaka, very attractive and couldn't help but feel a twinge of jealousy knowing his brother was hitting that. "Yes, Menma. And don't speak about your brother's wife like that," Kushina reprimanded her younger son with a glare that promised pain if he wouldn't listen. Needless to say that he got it loud and clear, and Kushina seemed to be aware of this as she nodded before turning her glare to her husband, who wasn't as affected as Menma was. "Now, are you going to come up with a good reason, or?" "So I wasn't imagining things, it really is you." Kushina didn't get to finish her sentence as she was interrupted by a voice and clicked her tongue in annoyance. She looked to her left, ready to tell whoever it was off, but the words died in her mouth when she saw the person that interrupted her. "Sensei." It wasn't her but her husband who spoke as his blue eyes came to rest on the taller and older male. His long, trademark spiky white mane was pulled into a neat ponytail as he stared not only at him but Kushina and Menma as well, with a look he couldn't quite discern. "Minato, Kushina," and he drew a blank at the red-haired teenager. "He's Menma, Minato-kun, and I's second child. You've been busy then," Jiraiya muttered as he nodded to himself. "Well, aren't you going to welcome your sensei?" He spread his arms for a hug. Staring at the man for some seconds, Minato slowly walked up to the older man before pulling him in for a quick hug. "So what are you doing here? Scratch that. How did you get here in the first place, given that I doubt either of you have an invitation?" "While I may have gotten older, I'm still a ninja, sensei." "I see. Though, now that you mention it, you don't look a day older despite 18 years having passed." Well, he chuckled nervously as he couldn't tell the truth and knew Jiraiya could see through his lies if he were to tell one. Luckily for him, Kushina addressed his sensei and averted his attention from him to her. Jiraiya, tell Minato that he should stop being such a pansy and go greet our son for the first time since his birth, Ebane. Hold up Kushina, I agree with Minato here. Not because he's my student, he quickly added as he saw her director fury at him. But see it from Naruto's perspective. He just got married with the love of his life. And let me tell you, those two are completely head over heels for each other. Hell, just look at them and tell me I'm wrong? Kushina did and quickly understood what he was saying. The pair of blondes radiated both happiness and love as they were being congratulated on their marriage by the guests that were present. Look, Naruto has had a rough childhood. I'm not fully aware of the details, only sensei was, but he's no longer with us, but from the bits and pieces I've gathered it was rather damaging. There's self-doubt as he thought his parents never loved him for holding the kyubi, abandonment issues you could call it as well. He was isolated as a child and lived on his own since he was a boy no older than 5. I'm still not sure what sensei was thinking by letting a kid his age live by himself. He shook his head not to derail himself. Aside from that, there was a severe lack of attention as the general population of Konoha despised him as a child, resulting in him not knowing how to handle certain emotions such as affection and love. More so not even knowing how it felt to experience those feelings. At least Yasaka told me this in a small conversation we had in which she discussed Naruto's mental health. She has been an enormous help to the boy by just being there for him and showing him the love and care Konoha denied him. Just looking at him when he smiles compared to when he was back in Konoha, and it is easy to see these are much more genuine. And that's not even mentioning that the boy is already a father. Jiraiya wiped away a tear of pride, missing the frozen forms of Kushina and Minato upon hearing that. I couldn't believe myself at the first time I heard it from his mouth or when I saw just who it was he had a child with. I knew right then and there that the student had surpassed the master. Minato. Kushina slowly turned to face her husband, who wore the same expression of shock as she had. Why yes, we're grandparents. I think so. He answered numbly as he didn't quite know how to react to that. It was just too much. First he found out his first son alive, and here in Kyoto of all places. Then, if that wasn't enough, he found out it was his son that was part of the reason he was sent here in the first place. And then, to add a final nail in the coffin, his sensei just told that his son was already a father, making him and Kushina grandparents. This was just too much. A granddaughter to be precise. I've seen her myself and she's as cute as a button. Not even kidding. If she grows up to resemble anything like her mother, Naruto will have a hard time to keep any boys away. He chuckled to himself at the image it caused to pop up in his mind before turning serious again. I think it's best if you ask for a separate appointment, if only to let him enjoy this day with his wife without revealing yourself. But Kushina wanted to protest. It wasn't fair. He was right there. Yet, seeing the look Jiraiya sent them, along with how her husband seemed resigned, could she really not wait a little longer if it would keep him happy? Fine. Yes, she could. What is a month or so compared to 18 years, right? Thank you. Now I suggest you leave before someone might spot you and start asking why Minato resembles Naruto so much or asks to see your invite. That was our plan in the first place, sensei. Minato walked over to his wife and placed a hand on her shoulder. Come Menma, you'll get to meet your brother some other time along with your niece. His other son moved closer to his father and grabbed onto his sleeve before the three disappeared with a smokeless shunshin. He wanted to use his Hirishin, but the added effect of bright yellow flash that came with it made it not suitable for their current situation. That was surprisingly wise of you. Jiraiya turned around to see Tsunade standing there, arms crossed beneath her bosom as her eyes flickered to the spot Minato and the rest of his family stood not even a minute ago. You heard all what I said? A nod. Indeed. I had to hide my surprise to see those two here. I wonder how they survived. According to reports, both were impaled through the chest during the Kyuubi attack, but they seemed fine, if not better than fine. I wonder that as well, but doubt he'd tell me. I could tell he was evading to answer when I asked how he still looked so young. Perhaps he has something to do with the supernatural, maybe. Now, how about you head over and congratulate the boy? I've done so and so have most of us. The Toad Sage stared at his old teammate for a handful of seconds before nodding. Hey, sure. Hey Naruto, the blonde in question paused the conversation he was having with Sairoorg and looked to see Jiraiya walking over to him. If you aren't busy, you mind if we talk for a bit? Naruto stared at the older man for a few seconds before glancing at Sairoorg, who gave a nod. Alright. I guess I can spare some time. Kusha should be with Yasaka-chan, who I thought was also with Kuroka. Ah, they're over there. He pointed to where his wife was standing with Sairoorg's queen. Kuno was back in her arms as he saw that Amaterasu and Susanoo stood with them as well. Cool, I'll see you when you're done I suppose. Naruto nodded before he walked off and left him with Jiraiya. Well, first I want to congratulate you. How does it feel? You're now officially married now. How it feels? I'm not sure if I can express it in words, but I feel happy. He rubbed his wedding ring with his thumb. I wanted something like this ever since I was a child, and now I've achieved such with the love of my life. Yasaka and I are now officially married, and I can tell she's very happy too, as it eased some worries she'd previously had. Worried? What sort? As from looking at you two you seem to be a perfect couple. Ah. Well, we're as good as I'd say so myself, but she had some doubts when it comes to other women. Even after I'd told her countless of times I won't ever leave her. He shook his head with a smile. Initially we weren't planning on getting married until Kuno was a little bit older. Not because we don't love each other, once again, but so it would be a more memorable event for her. But with certain circumstances happening along with the fact that we clearly love each other and I doubt that we'll ever stop, I figured why wait. You really do love her, huh? I'm honestly happy for you. You deserve it. Now, Jiraiya patted his student on his back. Go meet up with your friends and wife. I'm going to grab some snacks and do my own thing. Will do. Oh, and Jiraiya, feel free to come by sometime as I have a couple questions I want to ask. With that he departed from the man and made his way over to where Yasaka was at along with the company surrounding her. His wife perked up as she saw him, and so did Kuno. The little girl made grabbing motions and held her arms out towards him the second she saw him. He nodded at Yasaka, who handed over Kuno, his daughter quickly snuggling in his hold. He shared a soft kiss with his love before greeting the two Shinto gods and thanking them for watching Kuno. It's fine. You know I don't mind and like spending some time with little Kuno as she behaves well. That's good to hear, isn't it, Kuno? He kissed the top of her head, right in between her little fox ears, which twitched in response. So, what are we talking about? He inquired. He had time, and so had the rest. After all, today was a day of celebrations without any worries. They could focus on those tomorrow.